The chilly April morning of 2012 began with an unusual disturbance on Pine Hill Road, in the suburbs of Spokane Valley, Washington. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest 2-story house in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as tactically dressed officers spread out, silently surrounding the area. Inside, Clayton Butler, 58 years old, a former private investigator respected by the local community, was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for over 30 years since leaving the volunteer force in Wenatchee. A rapid knock sounded at 7:41 a.m. Clayton Butler, Spokane Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1976 disappearance of Lydia Harmon." One officer later recalled that Butler's hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, but his gaze remained unnervingly calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 36 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Wenatchee Riverfront Park, Washington, on the night of August 14, 1976, still echoed faintly with the sounds of the summer festival that had just ended. Strings of decorative lights gradually dimmed as the stalls closed one by one, leaving isolated patches of light on the wide grassy area along the Columbia River. Groups of people dispersed along the paths leading to the main road, their chatter fading gradually before being swallowed by the quiet stillness of the town at night. Around 11 o'clock, 17-year-old Lydia Harmon was standing with her group of friends near the outdoor stage area, where the band had just finished packing up their equipment. After a few goodbyes, she separated from the group, saying she would head home early because she had to help her mother prepare for the weekend market the next day. The family car was parked in the lot behind Lewis and Clark Elementary School, just a few minutes' walk from the park, but requiring her to cross a dimly lit stretch of road that was usually deserted at night. Lydia walked along the paved path that followed the row of trees in Riverfront Park, where the yellow glow from the lamps cast long shadows on the ground. The cool summer night air, mixed with the gentle lapping of the river against the shore, made the path unusually quiet, especially since the crowd from the festival had almost completely dispersed. As Lydia turned onto the narrow path leading toward the elementary school, 20-year-old Clayton Butler, a festival volunteer who was cleaning up cables and signs near the side gate, happened to encounter her. He greeted Lydia, and according to his later account, she responded with a polite smile before continuing to walk faster, her gaze fixed on the dark parking lot ahead. The distance from there to where Lydia had parked was not far, but that stretch lacked lighting, with dense rows of trees on both sides extending along the back of the school grounds. That was the last time anyone saw Lydia alive. By nearly midnight, the Harmon family began to grow uneasy when Lydia had not returned, though she should have been home more than half an hour earlier. They called a few of her friends, all of whom confirmed that Lydia had left the festival early. Anxiety escalated quickly, and Lydia's parents drove along the route from the park to home, stopping to check places she might have visited. They turned into the parking lot behind Lewis and Clark, sweeping the area with their headlights, but finding neither Lydia's car nor any sign that she had returned there. The two continued on foot along the school's back grounds, shining flashlights into patches of grass and bushes near the fence, calling Lydia's name multiple times, but receiving no response. By nearly 1 a.m., all self-explanatory possibilities had been ruled out. No one in the family knew why Lydia might have gone elsewhere at that hour, and her complete loss of contact was something that had never happened before. At 1:10 a.m. on August 15, 1976, Lydia's father picked up the phone, dialed the Wenatchee Police Department, and reported that his daughter was missing. Police Chief Norman Wells received the call just after 1:15 a.m. when the Wenatchee Police Department headquarters was lit only by the dim yellow lights of the duty area. He arrived at the Harmon home a few minutes later, carrying a notebook and a missing person report form. In the still-lit living room, Wells listened to the family describe how Lydia had not returned after the festival, noting every detail. Age 17, about 5 feet 5 inches tall, long brown hair, wearing a dark green t-shirt and jeans that evening. According to her parents, Lydia had left home around 6 p.m. with friends to attend the festival at Wenatchee Riverfront Park and planned to be back before midnight. Wells carefully confirmed the last time Lydia was seen by her friends, establishing the time frame around nearly 11 p.m. when she separated from the group to head toward the parking lot behind Lewis and Clark Elementary School. He also noted important information. 20-year-old Clayton Butler, a festival volunteer, was the only person who encountered Lydia on the path leading to the parking lot. Wells marked Butler's name under last witness contact, while requesting the family provide phone numbers for the group of friends to conduct interviews first thing in the morning. Based on that preliminary information, Wells established a Level 1 missing timeline according to the family and friends' accounts. Lydia attended the festival from around 6 p.m., watched the music program, grabbed snacks at the food court. Around nearly 11 p.m., the friends split up, and Lydia headed to the parking lot alone. After that, no one saw her. The family realized she hadn't come home and reported it to police at 1:10 a.m. This was an initial guiding timeline, not yet independently verified by police, but Wells used it as the basis to determine the first areas to check. After completing the missing person intake report, Wells explained the response protocol for cases of a minor absent beyond a safe time frame. He contacted dispatch to confirm patrol cars near the Riverfront Park area during the time Lydia went missing and directed the duty officer to review traffic cameras along the town's main routes. Though he knew camera systems were very limited at that time, Wells instructed the family to stay home while police searched locations Lydia might have passed through, while noting key timestamps to prepare for the next investigative steps. As he left the Harmon home around 3 a.m., Wells knew that searching the area was just the beginning. To understand what happened, he needed to trace the last people who saw Lydia. Returning to headquarters, he opened the Level 1 witness list and began contacting the 3 friends who had gone to the festival with Lydia at Wenatchee Riverfront Park: Marcy Turner, Helen Ruiz, and David Fowler. All 3 were invited to the police station and arrived around after 7 a.m. Wells asked them to recount the entire evening schedule in detail: arrival time at the festival, areas they visited, people they met, and when Lydia left the group. According to Marcy, the group arrived at the park just after 6, walked through the food court area, then went to the stage for the music program that lasted until nearly 9:30. After the final act, they wandered around the festival grounds, bought some snacks, then sat on the grass near the riverbank. Wells noted these timestamps to cross-reference with the initial timeline. When asked about when Lydia separated, all 3 agreed it was around nearly 11 p.m. When Lydia said she wanted to head home early because she had things to do the next morning and would walk to the parking lot behind Lewis and Clark Elementary, where she had parked upon arrival. Ellen remembered Lydia leaving normally, with no signs of worry or unease, and no one following her right as she left the group. This helped Wells solidify the prior timestamp. Lydia left the festival alone, heading toward the path connecting the park to the school's back grounds. David added that the area after 10 p.m. was quite empty and poorly lit, but it was the shortest route to the parking lot. After recording the friends' statements, Wells moved on to interviewing Clayton Butler, the person identified as the last witness in the Level 1 timeline. Butler arrived at the police station around 8:20 a.m., wearing the Riverfront Festival volunteer t-shirt, looking somewhat tired after the cleanup night. Wells asked Butler to describe exactly when he encountered Lydia and the specific location. Butler stated that he was cleaning up cables near the park's side gate, close to the small path leading to the back of Lewis and Clark, when he saw Lydia walking past at a steady pace. According to Butler, Lydia looked at him and smiled in greeting, then said she was on her way to the parking lot. Wells asked further about distance and timing. Butler estimated it was between 10:55 and 11:05 p.m., and he was no more than 5 meters from Lydia when he saw her turn toward the road to the parking lot. Butler said there was no one else in sight at that moment, and he noticed nothing unusual in Lydia's demeanor or actions. Wells noted that Butler's statement aligned with the friend's accounts of Lydia leaving alone toward the elementary school road. He marked, "No conflicts detected in the initial statements since the time, location, and events matched the collected data." The Level 1 interviews concluded around nearly 9 a.m., and Wells moved to the next task in the investigative process. Immediately after finishing the Level 1 witness interviews around nearly 9 a.m. on August 15, 1976, Police Chief Norman Wells proceeded to mobilize search teams according to protocol for unexplained disappearances. The summer morning in Wenatchee was still cool, with clear skies and good visibility, allowing for wide and continuous deployment without weather interference. Wells returned to police headquarters, requesting dispatch to send urgent alerts to off-duty officers while mobilizing mobile patrol units in the southern part of town. Search notifications were also sent to local volunteer groups, those who often assisted during town events or emergencies, including the Wenatchee Volunteer Mothers, a highly active community organization known for quick coordination and experience in searching for lost children or missing elderly in the Riverside Park areas. Wells directly oversaw the coordination center, dividing the search area into 5 segments based on Lydia's likely movement directions from the newly established timeline: 1. Riverfront park area and side paths; 2. The paved path connecting the park to the back of Lewis and Clark Elementary; 3. The parking lot behind the school and adjacent areas; 4. The small northern trail running along the tree line behind the school's sports field; and 5. Expanded areas where Lydia might have accidentally turned, including nearby open lots, drainage ditches, or unofficial side trails not on official maps. Each segment was assigned to a search team of police and volunteers. The search team of police and volunteers. Wells emphasized rules. Teams must move in a line with close enough spacing to not miss small traces. Report immediately any strange objects, fabric scraps, footprints, drag marks, or disturbances in vegetation. After dividing areas, Wells assigned core personnel to each team. Team 1 for the park area included 4 officers and 8 volunteers, mostly familiar with riverfront park terrain. Team 2 for the connection between park and school included 3 officers, 5 volunteers, and 2 Wenatchee Volunteer Mothers members experienced in nighttime searches during large events. Team 3 for the school parking lot included 4 officers, 8 volunteers, and 2 capable of marking scenes to local police standards. Team 4 for the northern trail, with weak lighting and complex terrain, included young fit volunteers experienced in hiking, led by 2 officers. Team 5 expanded to open areas, mainly to rule out accidents or wrong turns. Around 9:30 a.m., as search teams gathered on the eastern park grass for tools and instructions, Clayton Butler appeared and offered to join. Since Butler was a festival volunteer familiar with the park and school areas, Wells allowed him to join the volunteer team and assigned him to help divide groups by position and ability. Butler quickly integrated with the volunteers and volunteered to coordinate 2 subgroups in teams 2 and 4. The overlapping dark path and northern trail areas. Wells noted Butler's offer in the duty log, believing an extra person knowledgeable about the area would shorten search time. He then assembled all personnel to brief search rules. No solo movement. Always mark swept areas with reflective paint or tape, maintain radio contact every 5 minutes, and report any abnormality, no matter how small. Around 10 a.m., teams dispersed as directed. Wells stood at the temporary coordination point near the park's ball field, watching teams enter assigned areas. Team 1 headed into the grass and riverside paths. Team 2 began sweeping the paved path to the elementary school. Team 3 searched the parking lot, while Team 4 moved to the northern trail, where Butler volunteered to help organize the search formation. The entire force was deployed orderly, based entirely on data from witness statements, and Wells marked areas on the map, tracking the search per protocol for unexplained disappearances. The search teams began sweeping the central area around 10:15 a.m. on August 15, 1976, right after full deployment under Police Chief Norman Wells' direction. The central area in the search scope included 3 key points: the parking lot behind Lewis and Clark Elementary, the connecting paths from the park to the school's back grounds, and the stretch Lydia Harmon would theoretically have taken if leaving the festival and heading to her car via the shortest route. Team 3, primarily responsible here, deployed in a line formation per search rules, starting from the western edge of the school's ball field and advancing toward the parking lot. Wells was present at the starting point to ensure tight formation, with spacing close enough to not miss small traces like fabric scraps, scratches on the ground, or vegetation changes. The parking lot on Sunday morning was quiet, with only a few cars belonging to school staff or nearby residents. One officer checked each row, crouching to shine a flashlight under vehicles to ensure nothing or no one was hidden. Another group marked points with reflective paint on the ground to confirm swept areas. Along the chain-link fence separating the lot from the school's back grounds, volunteers checked low bushes and compacted soil, possibly from overnight passage. No strange objects were found. Some flattened grass near the back entrance was noted, but the marks were too faint and shapeless, likely from festival activities or prior park traffic. After fully searching the lot, the team moved to the school's back grounds, where the paved path extended from the park. Team 2 had swept the start of this path earlier, but Wells required Team 3 to recheck the overlap to avoid misses. The paved path ran through an area with tall trees on both sides, dense foliage blocking light. The search line moved slowly meter by meter, checking gaps between roots, disturbed soil streaks, and unusual piles of dry leaves. One Wenatchee Volunteer Mothers member found small indentations near a large tree base, but close inspection showed children's footprints from the previous day's festival, unrelated to Lydia. As the team neared the end of the path, where Butler claimed to have met Lydia the night before, Wells paused to closely observe the intersection between the paved path and the small road to the parking lot. He used his sketch map to cross-reference the location based on Butler's and friends' statements. Normally, Lydia would go straight on the paved path, then turn right to the lot. However, after nearly an hour of meticulous meter-by-meter sweeping, the team found no traces proving Lydia passed that turn. No skid marks, no fresh leaf disturbances, no dropped personal items, and no nearby witnesses from the previous night reporting seeing Lydia enter the back grounds. The grass patches at this junction showed no recent separation or compression, reinforcing that Lydia did not enter the expected area. As the team continued to the exit near the school's back sports field, with even weaker light, results remained unchanged. More detailed checks of planters, thick bushes, trash cans on the lot edge yielded no evidence like clothing scraps, purse, papers, or physical signs related to Lydia. All pointed to one conclusion: no evidence Lydia took the expected route from park to lot, meaning she turned elsewhere, or stopped before reaching this section, or was detained somewhere else before leaving the park. Wells noted this assessment in the coordination log, marking the central area as thoroughly swept and temporarily ruling out Lydia following the initial logical route. Around noon, on August 15, 1976, after the search team completed sweeping the central area without discovering any traces proving that Lydia Harmon had followed the expected route, Sheriff Norman Wells decided to expand the search perimeter beyond the park and the school backyard. Based on the topographic map of the town of Wenatchee and the adjacent forested areas, Wells identified the next area to canvass as the southern fringe of Wenatchee National Forest, a vast tract of land with numerous unofficial trails, some of which were only a few hundred meters from the backyard of Lewis and Clark Elementary School. Although the likelihood of Lydia venturing deep into the forest on her own was considered low, with no traces found in the central area, Wells did not want to overlook any plausible direction of travel. He returned to the temporary coordination point and instructed the duty unit to notify all the volunteer groups still in the park, that the search perimeter would be expanded into the forested area, while calling for volunteers experienced in hiking, familiar with steep terrain and dirt trails, to join the new teams. About 30 minutes later, more than 20 volunteers showed up, including members of the Wenatchee Volunteer Mothers, several local youths who regularly hiked, and a few employees from the town park department. Wells divided this additional force into 3 subsidiary teams, each with at least 2 police officers accompanying them to ensure proper marking procedures, communication, and scene oversight. While Wells was assigning personnel, Clayton Butler appeared at the coordination point and offered to help because he was familiar with the northern forest area from having participated in many outdoor activities there. Based on Butler's prior statement and the fact that he had helped coordinate search groups that morning, Wells noted the offer and considered assigning Butler to the Northern Forest Sweep Team, where there were several interconnected trails running parallel to the boundary behind the school before curving upward. Wells opened the detailed topographic map of Wenatchee Forest and designated the areas the search teams could access that same day. He marked 3 main routes: the southern route along the forest edge, the eastern route crossing open clearings and secondary trails, and the northern route, the longest and most complex, with many small intersections and limited visibility due to dense canopy. While reviewing the map, Butler suggested that the search team should give special priority to the northern route, explaining that the area was rarely visited, making it easy for someone to get lost or take a wrong turn. Wells listened and noted the suggestion, but still required an even sweep of all 3 directions. However, due to the limited number of volunteers experienced in forest hiking, the northern team ended up with more members than the other 2, and Butler was assigned to assist in leading that team. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the 3 expanded teams moved into the forest area. Wells temporarily stationed himself at the junction between the forest edge and the school backyard to coordinate communications, track the team's progress via radio, and mark advancements on the map. The southern team moved along a fairly wide dirt trail that was easy to observe, but found no signs of disturbance on the ground or vegetation. The eastern team encountered some patches of flattened grass in the open areas, but close inspection revealed old footprints with no characteristics linking them to Lydia or the time of disappearance. Meanwhile, the northern team, the one Butler was part of, penetrated deeper into an area with dense bushes and intersecting small trail branches. Butler directed the team to spread out in a tight line, sweeping each section in a way he described as more practical for this terrain. Wells monitored the northern team's progress via radio and requested reports every 5 minutes. Butler's team reported sweeping along the main trail for nearly 40 minutes without discovering anything noteworthy. When the team swept further into a small branching trail leading to higher ground, Wells marked that location on the map to track the direction of movement. However, over the course of more than an hour, Butler's team still found no physical evidence, shoe prints, drag marks, fabric scraps, or any anomalies. The southern and eastern teams also continuously reported nothing found. Wells compiled information from all 3 teams and paused to re-examine the map. By mid-afternoon, the forested area around the school and park had been swept with a radius wide enough to confirm that Lydia had not traveled in natural directions or accidentally veered into the forest while leaving easily identifiable traces. Wells noted the preliminary conclusion: the adjacent forest area provided no new data, and there was no physical evidence or signs directly related to Lydia's disappearance. The expanded search within Wenatchee National Forest ended without results, forcing Wells to continue considering other directions based on the scant data collected on the first day of searching. Toward late afternoon on August 15, 1976, as the search force prepared to return to the coordination point to summarize results, after many hours without finding any traces, a volunteer from the northern team suddenly reported over the radio that he had spotted a white object lying among bushes about 10 meters off the main trail. Wells immediately instructed the northern team leader to mark the location and preserve the scene until he could arrive to inspect it directly. The reported area was on a section that Butler had suggested prioritizing that morning, a small worn branch diverging from the main path deeper into the forest edge, where sunlight filtered through the canopy in only sparse streaks. Wells, accompanied by 2 officers, hurried to the reported location, instructing other members to keep their distance to avoid disturbing potential traces. Upon arrival, he saw a piece of white fabric caught on a low branch of a bush, approximately 8 to 10 centimeters long, with uneven torn edges. The fabric scrap was still fairly clean, not covered in thick dust or decayed leaves, suggesting it had appeared recently. Wells, wearing gloves, picked it up and turned it in his hand to examine the fibers. While he was assessing the object, Butler and his support group also approached. As soon as he saw the fabric scrap, Butler immediately commented that it looked like the color of Lydia's shirt from last night. Recalling the detail that Lydia had been wearing a dark blue t-shirt with white patterns as he had stated that morning. No one on the team at that moment had reason to doubt the connection, Butler mentioned. And Wells, given Butler's role as a volunteer who had seen Lydia right before the disappearance, placed the fabric in a standard evidence bag, marked the location, and noted that it might be evidence related to the case. Butler's spontaneous ability to identify the fabric further drew Wells's attention, since Butler was the last person to have seen Lydia and could clearly remember what she was wearing. However, Wells did not request immediate forensic examination, but decided to take the evidence back to headquarters to store with the missing person file for the day. When a few volunteers asked about the possibility that the fabric belonged to someone else, Wells replied that the northern forest area was rarely visited, increasing the probability that it belonged to Lydia. In reality, the trail section, where the evidence appeared, was not a frequently used walking area due to unfavorable terrain, and this small branch did not lead to any camping or picnic sites. This further reinforced Wells's initial assessment that the appearance of the fabric there could provide a new direction for the search. Wells used reflective paint to mark the area where the fabric was found and instructed the northern team to expand the search within a nearly 100-meter radius around the bush barrier. Butler, standing near Wells as he marked the scene, continued to suggest that Lydia might have taken a wrong turn while heading to the parking lot due to low light or been drawn into this side path for some reason. Butler's suggestion was recorded by Wells in the coordination log as a hypothesis to verify the next day. Butler's on-site assessment further focused the search team's attention on the northern route, even though this area had previously only been part of the expanded search. While the search team swept the surrounding area, Wells reviewed the map and compared the fabric's location to the route Lydia should have taken. Clearly, for the fabric to appear at this spot, Lydia would have had to deviate from the main path to the parking lot by at least 20 meters and move through an unmarked side path. No hypothesis at that time explained why Lydia would enter the forest, but Wells recorded in the file that the appearance of the related object in the northern direction needs serious consideration. Late in the afternoon, as the search teams returned to the coordination point, Wells announced the discovery of new evidence and affirmed that the northern direction would be one of the primary focuses of the continuing search effort. This led most volunteers to believe they had touched the first clue potentially directly related to Lydia's disappearance. Although Wells knew that all evidence must be evaluated objectively, he still decided to include the fabric in the file without requesting immediate lab testing, as fabric analysis procedures in Wenatchee at that time had to be sent to the Chelan County Analysis Lab, taking at least several days for results. Wells believed that keeping the evidence at headquarters and continuing the search in the new direction was the immediate priority. This decision, though appropriate for the conditions of 1976, inadvertently turned the fabric scrap into the erroneous basis for directing the entire search. As the sun began to set and the search team was dismissed for the first day, Wells made his final note in the coordination log. Evidence fabric scrap appeared on Northern Trail. direction requires further verification. He had no idea that this very evidence, combined with Butler's subjective assessment, would lead the entire search effort astray from the direction in which Lydia had actually disappeared. On the morning of August 16, 1976, as the search team regrouped at the temporary coordination point on the edge of Riverfront Park to prepare for the second day of sweeping, Clayton Butler proactively approached Sheriff Norman Wells and stated that he remembered an additional detail he believed could be important in determining Lydia's direction of travel. Butler said that when he encountered Lydia the previous evening, besides her walking through the path leading to the school, he had the impression that Lydia did not follow the main road but veered slightly to the right, as if she was avoiding a group of people or trying to find a different route in the dimly lit area. Butler provided no specific description of the group he thought Lydia might have avoided, but he emphasized that Lydia's angle of movement leaned more toward the northern trail area rather than going straight toward the parking lot. Butler also mentioned having seen some local teenagers gathering in the northern forest fringe on weekend evenings, though he had not seen anyone at the time he encountered Lydia. This information, though vague and unverified, created an additional hypothesis that led Wells to reconsider the search perimeter. Since the previous day's search had found no traces in the central area, and the discovery of the white fabric on the northern trail, though not yet analyzed, was being treated as a new anchor point, Wells temporarily viewed Butler's supplemental statement as supporting data for the direction already expanded late the previous day. He recorded Butler's words in the coordination log, marking it as information directly related to a plausible direction of travel, then immediately reviewed the map to adjust the day's sweep perimeter. Wells decided to allocate additional personnel to the northern trail while requesting the experienced forest team to expand the perimeter from the trail branch where the fabric was found to higher ground and side paths tentatively noted on the 1974 topographic map. Although there was no evidence that Lydia had turned into these side paths, Butler's statement that she seemed to veer toward the forest led Wells to believe Lydia might have lost her bearings due to poor lighting or been drawn by some sound or movement in the forest. The teams were readjusted by Wells. The northern team received 8 additional volunteers and 2 officers. The southern and eastern teams had personnel reduced to concentrate most resources on the area Butler mentioned. This readjustment was described by Wells in the coordination log as a response based on new data obtained from the closest witness. When Butler heard Wells announce the new plan, he continued to suggest that the search team should check depressions in the terrain near the trail where the ground dipped and was easily obscured from the main path. He explained that the area had some soft soil spots due to runoff from the hillside that could retain traces if someone passed through. Wells marked this opinion and agreed to have the search team at a parallel sweep line 10 to 15 meters from the main trail. In a quick meeting with the team leaders, Wells clearly stated that Butler's supplemental statement was not considered verified evidence, but because it aligned with the only direction currently having a suspicious object, expanding the search in this direction was necessary to rule out the possibility of Lydia deviating from the expected route. All these adjustments caused the search focus to tilt entirely toward the north, a direction Wells now regarded as the priority direction requiring comprehensive sweeping. By around 8 o'clock in the morning, the search force was deployed according to the new plan, with Butler continuing to participate in the leading group on the trail. Wells recorded these adjustments in the official file, viewing them as an important step to expand the search perimeter based on the latest information he had. On the morning of August 16, 1976, after recording Butler's supplemental statement and adjusting the search plan, Sheriff Norman Wells returned to the temporary coordination table set up near the backyard of Lewis and Clark Elementary School to finalize the official search map for the operation. This was a critical step to standardize the sweep perimeter for the second day and beyond, ensuring all routes and adjacent forest areas were clearly marked to avoid overlap, omissions, or repetition. Wells spread out the large-scale topographic map of Wenatchee and the edge of Wenatchee National Forest, which was outdated with many notes drawn from forestry surveys before 1973. He used a red ink pen to list each area already swept on the first day. Riverfront Park, the paved path connecting the park to the school backyard, the parking lot behind the school, and the main northern forest trails. Then he circled the areas to be expanded under the new plan, focusing especially on the northern trail and the subsidiary branches Butler described as possible turns Lydia might have taken. As Wells evaluated the entire central area and adjacent forest, team leaders arrived one by one to report. And it was from these reports that Wells began to clearly see the misdirection forming in the search perimeter. One of the officers in charge of the eastern team asked Wells whether the eastern area should be included in the comprehensive sweep plan, an area consisting of a wide strip of land connecting the school backyard to sparsely populated residential roads, and the most logical direction of travel if Lydia had wanted to head toward downtown rather than back to her car. However, up to that point, Wells had regarded the eastern area as the least likely direction because no statements mentioned Lydia moving that way. When the officer raised it again, Wells flipped through the map and determined that the eastern route lacked distinct trails like the north and south and was fairly close to residential areas, meaning, if Lydia had passed through, she was highly likely to have been seen by someone the previous evening. While Wells was considering this, Butler approached the coordination group to update the situation from the northern team. He said loudly that if the fabric found the previous day was truly related to Lydia, there was absolutely no reason for Lydia to have gone eastward, an area that was open and flat, incompatible with the forest-leaning direction of travel. Butler had emphasized since morning. Butler's statement was not a professional conclusion, but it was made at the exact moment Wells was still wavering over a young officer's proposal to return the eastern area to the search map. Butler's confident tone caused a few volunteers to nod in agreement, creating the impression that the eastern direction had virtually no realistic basis for consideration at that time. That very moment influenced Wells's decision. He leaned over the map again, then lightly crossed out the eastern area with black ink, noting, "Not prioritized, low probability." This decision inadvertently removed the eastern area, the area that was actually the most important, closest to the route Lydia might have chosen if she changed her mind and wanted to head toward the main road instead of back to the parking lot from the official search perimeter. Wells continued focusing on completing the map for the northern direction, drawing 3 additional arcs for 3 new sweep lines, the main line along the large trail, a parallel line along the tree line, and a higher line ascending the slope terrain. He required all subsidiary trails connecting to the main road to be marked and directed the search team to sweep each branch, even those appearing only a few dozen meters long. Wells noted that the northern direction has complex terrain requiring concentrated resources, further solidifying the priority given to the direction Butler had proposed. While Wells continued finalizing the map, the officer in charge of the eastern team reminded him once more that this area had not been fully checked the previous day and might contain traces easily overlooked due to its flat and unremarkable terrain. But Wells only replied briefly that the current priority was based on the best data available, referring to the white fabric in Butler's supplemental statement. He placed emphasis on circling the northern forest area while drawing a large circle encompassing the entire trail branch where the fabric was found. From Wells's perspective, the fabric was the only physical data point at that time, and there was no reason to disperse forces to an area without clues. Afterward, Wells ordered 3 large copies of the search map to be printed, one to remain at the coordination point, one given to the northern team leader, and the final one given to the support force from the town patrol unit. All maps were adjusted to prioritize the northern route and exclude the eastern area from the immediate plan. When Wells deployed the new tasks to each team, the entire second-day search force received maps with the revised perimeter, meaning all personnel, police and volunteers alike, automatically followed the misdirected search direction. Within minutes, the teams were ready, and the groups began dispersing into the forest along the newly marked routes. With the eastern area eliminated and the entire focus shifted to the northern forest, The official 1976 search had completely veered into a different direction, one not based on verified evidence, but on an unanalyzed piece of evidence and the unverified statements of a single witness. Wells noted at the end of that day's search plan page, official 1976 map northern direction, priority number 1, marking a critical turning point in the investigation process, though he had no idea that this decision would cause the entire effort to deviate from the correct path right from the early stage. In the afternoon of August 16, 1976, as the search teams were advancing deeper into the northern forest area, according to the adjusted map, Sheriff Norman Wells temporarily paused the on-scene sweep to return to headquarters and proceed with the next step in the investigation process, verifying the alibis of individuals present at the festival site at the time Lydia Harmon was last seen. This was intended to rule out or identify any persons who might have had contact with Lydia in the time frame from when she left her group of friends until the family realized she was out of contact. Wells began with the most important witness, Clayton Butler, recorded as the last person to encounter Lydia. In his statement taken earlier that day, Butler said he left the stage area around 10:40 p.m. to go collect cables near the side gate, then happened to see Lydia passing by between approximately 10:55 and 11:05 p.m. He also stated that after seeing Lydia turn toward the parking lot, he continued cleaning up in the festival area for about another 20 minutes before heading to the volunteer assembly point, leaving the park near 11:30 p.m. Wells cross-checked these details by calling Dan Wilson, the festival volunteer crew manager, to confirm the time Butler finished work. Dan said the evening had been quite busy, and while he didn't remember the exact minutes, he believed Butler was at the equipment assembly area around close to 11:30, along with 3 other volunteers. Wells noted this as an approximate confirmation, without specific evidence, but consistent with what Butler had stated. Although he should have considered the lack of precision in this confirmation, Wells instead marked Butler's alibi as consistent. When Dan added that Butler was usually the last to leave the stage area during evening events, Wells viewed this as a reinforcing factor that Butler had been present at the festival for an extended period and was unlikely to have left his position long enough to be involved in the disappearance. After completing the preliminary verification for Butler, Wells moved on to Lydia's friends. Marcy Turner confirmed that she left the festival near 11 p.m. with Lydia, Ellen, and David, but she and the other 2 friends went in the opposite direction from Lydia and did not see anyone following her. Marcy said she got home around 11:15 p.m., and her parents could vouch for that time. Wells called the Turner household. Marcy's mother confirmed her daughter arrived home before 11:20, with no signs of anything unusual. Ellen Ruiz was also called back to verify the departure time from the festival. According to her, Ellen left the park with David Fowler and arrived home around 11:25 p.m. Ellen's mother also confirmed her daughter came through the door at exactly that time. David Fowler said he walked Ellen home and then went over to a friend's house in the downtown area. His friend confirmed David was at his place around 11:30 p.m. and left shortly after. Wells noted that the friends' group alibis were all consistent and supported by family witnesses, so he temporarily considered them outside the suspect pool. Festival workers from that night were also questioned by Wells for information. 2 sound equipment cleanup crew members stated they saw Butler in the stage area after 11 p.m., though they didn't recall the exact time he left. One of them said Butler had returned to the assembly point to sign off on the task completion list, but the list only noted the time as after 11 o'clock, without specific minutes. Wells noted that this data aligned with what Dan Wilson had said, though the accuracy remained limited. Wells also checked the alibis of 3 local young men who had been spotted near the festival area the previous evening, according to patrol reports. All 3 had been noted by patrol officers as leaving the park area before 10:45 p.m. and not returning after that time. None of them had any connection to Lydia or Butler. All were at their respective homes at the time of the disappearance and had family corroboration. They were quickly removed from the suspect list. As Wells reviewed the entire alibi chart, he found no individual with any clear suspicious indicators. The time Lydia left her friends was around near 11 p.m. Butler was the last to see her, but his statement, though not bolstered by clear independent evidence, aligned with a series of indirect confirmations from other volunteers. Wells entered into the file that Butler's alibi matched the statement and had no conflicting elements, even though he had not yet cross-referenced this timeline with on-site data or other evidence. Lydia's friends all had solid alibis with no apparent motive. The festival workers and individuals spotted around the park also showed no leads connecting to Lydia. Ultimately, Wells compiled the alibi verification results into the second-day report. No standout suspects. The analysis table was marked closed on items, no conflicts, and Wells believed the search should continue based on the directions already established from physical evidence and additional statements. The final conclusion of the alibi verification section was recorded in the coordination log. No individual capable of becoming a suspect in the time frame from 10:55 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Continue focusing on the established search direction. After completing the alibi verification step and finding no individual with clear suspicious signs or contradictions, Sheriff Norman Wells shifted to evaluating possible hypotheses to explain Lydia Harmon's disappearance based on the limited data collected in the first 2 days. This was a necessary step in the missing person investigation protocol to determine priorities before continuing to invest resources in wide area searches. Wells opened the file, cross-referenced all responses from search teams, witness statements, and on-scene notes collected, then divided the possibilities into 4 main hypotheses. Lydia was abducted. Lydia left voluntarily. Lydia had an accident on the way to the parking lot, or Lydia left the festival area willingly and went to another location. For the abduction hypothesis, Wells considered the route Lydia had to take from the park to the parking lot. It was a short route, just a few minutes walk, but quite dark and deserted after 11 p.m. Wells noted that no witness had seen Lydia being approached or followed, and there were no signs of struggle or physical evidence indicating she was forcibly removed from the path. Search teams found no drag marks, dropped personal items, or any unusual footprints in the central area. If an abductor had been present, the perpetrator would have had to act very quickly, leave no traces, and exit the scene immediately. However, no suspicious vehicles had been reported seen near that area, and the route from the park to the main road was fairly open, likely to draw attention if there was unusual vehicle movement. Therefore, Wells noted that the abduction hypothesis could not be ruled out, but lacked supporting data. The hypothesis that Lydia left voluntarily was assessed as low probability based on information from family and friends. Wells reviewed the initial statements. Lydia showed no signs of family conflict, no history of running away, and the evening had proceeded normally, with a clear plan to head home early for work the next morning. If Lydia had intended to leave home, she would not have taken so few belongings, nor chosen a dark and short route to exit the festival. Additionally, there was no evidence she reached the parking lot, went to the main road, or took any form of transportation. Wells noted that the voluntary departure hypothesis did not fit Lydia's behavior on the day of the incident. In the accident hypothesis, Wells considered the possibility that Lydia fell, slipped or tumbled into some area between the park and the school. However, the path from the park to the school backyard was fairly flat, with no deep mounds, large ditches, or dangerous spots prone to accidents. Search teams had thoroughly swept the entire area, including less noticeable spots like planters, trash bins, low-lying ground, or large tree bases. No signs of disturbed soil, slide marks, or evidence suggesting Lydia had an accident were found. Wells also checked the weather report again. No rain, dry ground, making a slip and fall even less likely. This hypothesis thus lacked field-based support. The hypothesis that Lydia voluntarily left the festival area to go elsewhere was also considered by Wells. Some missing person cases in the town had involved young people leaving events to meet friends, go for a walk, or suddenly change plans. However, statements from the friends group indicated Lydia only said she wanted to head home early. No one was waiting for her outside the park, and there was no evidence she contacted anyone else around that time. Wells also considered the possibility that Lydia went toward the eastern residential area instead of the parking lot, but no nearby residents reported seeing her on that route. Moreover, the eastern area showed no unusual traces when preliminarily swept by search teams on the first day, though Wells had removed this area from the main search map on August 16th. Summarizing all analytical directions, Wells found that no hypothesis had sufficient supporting data. All relied on inference or theoretical possibility without ties to physical evidence or field traces. The very absence of confirmatory physical evidence caused the hypothesis evaluation process to reach an impasse. Wells could neither prove Lydia left the area in any direction nor find traces to confirm she was affected by an external factor. When Wells wrote the concluding line in the report for the end of August 16th, he clearly stated, "No hypothesis strong enough to determine the primary investigative direction. Complete lack of confirmatory physical evidence in the area where Lydia was last seen." This was a critical assessment, reflecting the limitations in field data and the misdirections that had formed from the outset of the search, when focus was directed toward areas without solid bases. In the 8 weeks following the evaluation of all initial hypotheses without any receiving reinforcement from field data, Sheriff Norman Wells continued to deploy 2 additional search waves to address remaining gaps in the investigative scope, with the slim hope of identifying any traces related to Lydia Harmon. The second search wave began on August 20, 1976, focusing on areas bordering the northern edge of Wenatchee National Forest, according to the plan outlined from the official search map. This time, Wells bolstered forces with personnel from the Wenatchee Forestry Service, utilizing staff familiar with the steep terrain and unofficial trails in the forest. Secondary trail routes, especially branches connecting to the main trail where the white fabric piece was found, were re-swept in denser formations. Wells also required the use of stakes to measure distances between search lines, ensuring no overlaps or omissions. However, after 4 days of continuous expanded searching, results remained as initial: no physical evidence, no new disturbance traces, no physical proof matching the time of Lydia's disappearance. The northern forest area, though vast and difficult to fully cover, still yielded no investigative value data. Toward the end of August, Wells shifted attention to areas along the Columbia River, based on the hypothesis that Lydia might have inadvertently turned toward the waterfront or had an accident while walking along the riverside route. This was a direction Wells considered to rule out the possibility of the victim encountering natural risk. The Riverside search team consisted of 5 officers and more than 10 volunteers familiar with the riverbank terrain. They swept in segments extending nearly 2 kilometers along the west bank, checking low bushes, moss-covered rocks, and access points close to the water's edge. Small rescue boats were added to survey the water surface and eddy points near the shore. Nevertheless, this 3-day search yielded no results. No matching shoe prints, no fabric pieces, personal items, or any signs that Lydia had passed through the riverside area on the night of the disappearance. The third search wave was conducted by Wells in the latter half of September 1976. As volunteer numbers began to decline due to personal commitments and the weather turning colder. This time, Wells returned to re-sweep deeper secondary trails in the forest and along 2 routes connecting Riverfront Park to the eastern residential area, an area removed from the main search map on August 16th, but still within the expanded investigative boundary. Teams were required to hike deeper into narrow branches, checking each large tree base, each depression, each area with dense vegetation. However, changing terrain over time, combined with heavy leaf fall in early autumn, made distinguishing old and new disturbances nearly impossible. After more than 5 hours of searching each day for 4 consecutive days, teams still found no signs related to Lydia. Wells noted, that the entire eastern route once again yielded no physical evidence, but since this area was not in the priority direction per the official map, he only recorded the result without considering further expansion due to no new suggestive factors. By early October, as search teams maintained only limited activity due to manpower shortages and general community fatigue, Wells held a brief meeting with officers to compile all data from the 3 search waves. He looked at the large map spread before him, where dozens of locations had been marked with reflective paint and wooden stakes. Among all the points swept over nearly 8 weeks, there were no new discoveries beyond the white fabric piece on August 15th, a piece of evidence still unexamined and not reinforced by any related traces. Wells entered into the report, no confirmatory physical evidence. All expanded search efforts, spanning various terrains and lasting dozens of days, produced absolutely no investigative progress. Wells also noted that no one reported a suspicious individual, no new statements emerged, and no leads indicated Lydia was approached by anyone after leaving her friends. The final days of the 3rd search wave unfolded heavily as Wells realized time was passing and the chance of finding any intact traces was diminishing. In the final summary meeting at Wenatchee PD headquarters in the first weekend of October, Wells wrote the concluding sentence, leading to the significant decision, no further basis to continue searching. This was the first time he acknowledged that all directions had been saturated and there was no remaining data to sustain a wide area search campaign. In early October 1976, immediately after concluding the 3rd search wave, without obtaining any traces or physical evidence, reinforcing a clear investigative direction, Sheriff Norman Wells began carrying out the necessary procedures to complete the investigation report and officially close the missing person file for Lydia Harmon. In this phase, the dismantling of the temporary coordination point at the edge of Riverfront Park occurred quietly on the morning of October 6th, as marking stakes, reflective tape, and search maps were collected. Wells gathered all notes, field reports, and interview transcripts to reorganize them into a complete file set as required by the Wenatchee Police Department. During the file review process, Wells reevaluated each item: the time Lydia left the festival, statements from the friends group, Butler's statement, the 2-month search scope, collected physical evidence, among which only the unexamined white fabric piece with no supporting proof. All stored data showed no guiding factors for continuing an active investigation. Wells entered into the conclusion section of the summary report, no new traces, physical evidence or witnesses discovered throughout the search period. Unable to determine direction of movement, status or location of the victim. Currently, no data of investigative value exists. Under Washington state regulations at the time, missing person cases with undetermined cause and no basis for further investigation were classified as missing person, no leads. Wells entered this classification code on the front page of the official file and signed confirmation that all procedural investigative steps had been fully performed. That same afternoon, Wells transferred the file set to the Chelan County Sheriff's Office archives for sealing. The file was placed in passive storage, where cases without new developments would be preserved long-term for reference as needed. Before handover, Wells affixed a label, clearly noting the case number, file opening date, file closing date, and additional note: no positive leads, ready to reopen if new data emerges. For Wells, this was not an easy decision, as he knew any unresolved missing person case became harder to trace over time. But with limited resources and the complete absence of evidence, he had no choice but to complete the process in accordance with legal regulations. A few days after the file was transferred, Wells noticed an entry in the volunteer crew's automatic logbook. Clayton Butler had informed the festival organizers and a few volunteer members that he would be leaving Wenatchee to move to Spokane, where he said he had accepted a new job with a private security company. Butler left town quietly, without further contact with police, and without appearing in any search activities from late September onward. This information was not entered by Wells into the file, as it was not directly related to the ongoing investigative data, but he kept it in his personal notebook as a peripheral note. By mid-October, the Lydia Harmon file was officially considered closed, and her disappearance became one of the unsolved cases in Wenatchee for 1976. From early 1977 through the end of 2011, Lydia Harmon's missing person file sat dormant in the Chelan County Archives, only pulled out a handful of times when a new detective came on board or when the sheriff's office reviewed cold cases to update the storage system. Each time the file was examined, the process followed the same pattern. The assigned detective reread the entire 1976 report, inspected the sole piece of evidence, a white cloth fragment, cross-checked the search notes, and re-evaluated witness statements. But every review ended in the same deadlock. No new data, no new witnesses, and no methods available to dig deeper into the information collected at the time of the incident. In the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, crime scene analysis and evidence processing in missing person cases like Lydia's relied entirely on direct observation or basic testing. Technologies for fiber analysis, trace identification, or movement reconstruction mapping were not advanced enough to yield meaningful results. The white cloth fragment, the file's only piece of evidence, was not forensically examined in 1976 due to the lack of corresponding testing procedures, and it was never pursued further because no one believed it could provide significant data. The 1976 search map also could not be reanalyzed with the technology of that era. All information was in handwritten markings, without detailed coordinates or the data needed to simulate paths or reconstruct what happened the night Lydia disappeared. Every detective who reviewed the file left similar notes, no tools or additional information to expand the investigation. In the 1990s, as law enforcement agencies in Washington began using computers for case storage and data analysis, Lydia Harmon's file was partially digitized, but this brought no significant progress. Digitization simply converted paper reports to electronic format, added no new information, and could not remedy the original data shortages. The search map remained a hand-drawn sketch, and the evidence was still just an unidentified cloth fragment. During this period, a few younger detectives assigned to the case tried cross-referencing Lydia's file with other missing person cases in the area, but there were no similarities or identifying features that allowed for connections. Some missing person cases in Chelan County were resolved in the late 1980s and early 1990s, thanks to new statements or late-appearing witnesses, but Lydia's file remained completely silent. No one reported seeing her after August 14, 1976, and there were no records in medical, school, or administrative files related to her. The case was considered to have fallen off the radar of the investigation system. Meanwhile, Clayton Butler, the last witness to see Lydia the night she vanished, gradually built a new life nearly 180 miles from Wenatchee. After leaving town in late 1976, Butler moved to Spokane and initially worked in private security. By the early 1980s, he founded a small private investigation firm specializing in civil surveillance, insurance fraud, and background checks. Butler's company grew rapidly in the 1990s as demand for investigative services increased, and he became a familiar figure in Spokane's business community. His career had no direct connection to Lydia's file, but the fact that he left Wenatchee shortly after the case was closed drew occasional attention from later detectives. However, since the file contained no evidence contradicting Butler's statement, and he was never an official suspect in 1976, there was no professional reason to investigate him further. Lydia Harmon's file existed as a no-leads missing person case for 35 years. Across generations of detectives, every note revolved around the same repeated conclusion: no new evidence to advance the investigation, and the technological limitations of the early period made the 1976 data impossible to exploit further. Throughout the period from 1977 to 2011, the file saw no progress, and Lydia's disappearance gradually became one of Wenatchee's longest silent cases. In early January 2012, when Lydia Harmon's file had been silent for over 3 decades in the Chelan County Archives, investigative reporter Caleb Price of the Spokane Ledger received an anonymous email to his work inbox just before midnight. The subject line was brief: Wenatchee File 1976, needs review. The body contained only a few lines, no greeting or signature, stating directly that Lydia Harmon's disappearance was never investigated in the right direction, and that the 1976 search map is not the only one that exists. The most notable part was the attachment, a low-resolution JPG image file named searchmap_alt_76. Caleb opened it and saw a topographic map of Wenatchee Riverfront Park, the backyard of Lewis and Clark Elementary School, and the edge of Wenatchee National Forest, the same area as the map he had seen in Chelan County's public files on the Lydia case, but with a completely different layout of marked paths. In the official map submitted by Wells in 1976, the search routes focused heavily northward, with 3 deep sweeping arcs into the forest and the entire eastern area crossed out, excluded from the search. But the map in the attachment was different. It included numerous markings in the eastern area, particularly a path connecting the school backyard to a series of vacant lots extending toward sparser residential zones. This area was encircled by 3 small red circles, along with handwritten notes in black pen: primary zone and not searched. Some markings even indicated turning points and intersections between main paths and side trails that the 1976 map never mentioned. Caleb zoomed in and noticed the handwriting was bold, slightly slanted to the right, looking like quick notes from someone familiar with topographic maps. The email provided no explanation of who drew this map, but it clearly showed a completely different search scope from what was reported during the initial investigation. Caleb cross-checked Chelan County's public records, the documents digitized after 1995, and confirmed that the attached map was not in any official archived file. This made the email far more significant. If this map truly existed in 1976 but was never used or disclosed, it meant Lydia's disappearance was not thoroughly searched from the start. Caleb printed the map and placed it next to Wells's official one for comparison. The differences became increasingly clear. The new map fully opened the eastern area. The old one crossed it out. The new map had a note to Zone A, right next to the eastern fence of the school backyard, exactly the route Lydia might have taken if she changed her mind or wanted to avoid the dark path to the parking lot. Wells's map completely ignored this route, as if it was never considered a possible direction. Caleb jotted this down in his notebook and reread the email. At the end, the sender wrote, "No one ever searched the right direction. Time to revisit." Butler knows. The name Butler made Caleb pause. He remembered Clayton Butler, who had appeared in some local articles in the late 1990s, when his private investigation firm in Spokane started gaining notice in high-profile civil surveillance cases. Caleb did not know how Butler was connected to this map, but having his name mentioned in an anonymous email about a disappearance over 35 years old was a detail that could not be ignored. Caleb pinned the map on his office board next to a copied old article about Butler from the newspaper's archives. The sudden appearance of this new map, especially with clear notes about an unsearched area, had brought the Lydia case, silent for decades, back into full suspicion. Caleb wrote in his notes, "If this map is real, the entire 1976 search direction is problematic." This was the last note he made that day before starting to consider contacting relevant agencies to verify the authenticity of the document sent by the anonymous source. Just 2 days after receiving the mysterious alternate map, on the morning of January 5, 2012, as Caleb Price was reviewing his notes in his office at the Spokane Ledger, a second anonymous email suddenly appeared in his inbox. It had no clear subject line, just the words, "Look at this." Unlike the first email, this one went straight to the point, a PNG image attachment, and a short paragraph, "He was there. East direction, not north. This is proof." Caleb opened the image. A faded color photo, apparently taken with a 1970s film camera, appeared on the screen. In the foreground was the old metal fence of the Lewis and Clark Elementary School backyard. In the middle of the frame under tree cover stood a man in a thick dark brown jacket, alone next to the path leading into the eastern vacant land. His face was not looking directly at the lens, but the features, posture, and hair made Caleb recognize him immediately. It was Clayton Butler, from right around 1976. Caleb zoomed in to pinpoint the location. Based on the 1976 map and the alternate map from the previous anonymous email, he realized the photo was taken exactly at a point on the route, never included in the official search scope. This was the area the edited map marked as Zone A, with the note "Not Searched." Caleb pulled up Wells's original map. That area had been crossed out, excluded from the search zone as of August 16, 1976. Yet in the attached photo, Butler was standing right there at a time that seemed to coincide with the night Lydia vanished or the early days of the search. This created a direct contradiction with the entire 1976 record. According to the reports, Butler only participated in searches in the northern forest area, and with volunteer teams, there was no note indicating he ever went through or was assigned to the eastern area. So why was there a photo of him there? And who took it? Caleb closely examined the photo's background: dim lighting, long shadows, likely nighttime or early dawn, very close to the time of Lydia's disappearance. This timing matched Butler's statement that he was in the stage area and volunteer assembly zone from 10:40 to 11:30 p.m. If the photo was authentic and unaltered, his presence there completely contradicted the alibi Wells accepted in 1976. The anonymous sender continued in the email, "This is just one of many. He never told the truth about where he was that night. Check again." Caleb knew that if the email's information was valid, this was no longer an isolated clue, but direct evidence that the 1976 search went wrong from the start, and that someone may have deliberately influenced it. Caleb could not verify the photo himself due to the lack of EXIF data, but the scanned film image, along with the style, color fading, and grain details, matched common consumer cameras of that era, making forgery far less likely. He immediately printed the photo and placed it next to the original and edited maps. The photo perfectly matched the excluded route's location. Caleb quickly noted, "This photo only has value if the photographer and timing can be identified." But he also understood that finding the photographer of a decades-old image was extremely difficult. The only way to authenticate it was to turn the information over to law enforcement, who had access to archives and could analyze the photo with modern forensic procedures. Caleb called the Spokane Police Department that afternoon, explaining that he had just received documents related to an unsolved 1976 Wenatchee disappearance, and that the photo showed a key witness present in an area excluded from the original search map. Caleb securely emailed the photo to the on-duty investigator, along with the edited map and the original. In the accompanying summary report, he clearly stated, "The photo shows Clayton Butler present in Zone A, an area not searched in 1976. His appearance there is inconsistent with the statement and alibi confirmed at the time." He also provided additional information that Butler currently ran a private investigation firm in Spokane, with easy access to the routes and areas needing verification. After completing the transfer of information, Caleb closed his laptop and looked at the 3 maps laid out side by side on his desk. In just a few days, 2 anonymous emails had taken the Lydia Harmon case from 35 years of stasis to a series of brand new questions never before asked. Caleb's final note of the day on the board read, "If the photo is real, the entire 1976 search scope may have been misdirected." This was the initial assessment that marked the turning point for a case thought to have been dormant for decades. Immediately after Spokane PD received the documents Caleb Price submitted, the Special Investigations Unit forwarded all the information to the Wenatchee Police Department and Chelan County Sheriff's Office, where Lydia Harmon's file had originally been handled in 1976. In early February 2012, A joint investigation team was formed with the first goal, fully reconstructing the timeline of the night of August 14, 1976, using analytical techniques unavailable at the time. This was a critical step to reassess the value of the old search map, the reliability of witness statements, especially Clayton Butler's, and the possible directions Lydia took the moment she left the festival. The analysis team consisted of 3 specialists, a lighting simulation expert, a geographic analyst, and a movement behavior specialist. They began by redigitizing the map of the festival area at Wenatchee Riverfront Park, the Lewis and Clark Elementary School backyard, and the paths leading to residential areas, while overlaying modern topographic data onto the old map to reconstruct elevation, tree density, lighting angles, and structures that could have caused obstructions in 1976. The first step was simulating the lighting on the night of August 14, 1976. The team requested historical meteorological data from NOAA, including sunset time, moon phase, cloud cover, and natural brightness levels. The results showed sunset at 8:18 p.m., a faint crescent moon, and very limited natural visibility after 11 p.m. The pathway lights in the park at the time were low intensity and covered only small portions of the paved walkways. From this, the 3D simulation revealed that Lydia, leaving the stage area between approximately 10:55–11 p.m., would have had to walk through a very dark section before reaching the turn to the parking lot. This reinforced the hypothesis that if Lydia was approached or changed direction, it could have happened without anyone noticing. But the most notable finding emerged when the team compared the lighting simulation to Butler's statement. Butler claimed he saw Lydia walking straight toward the parking lot and that he watched her silhouette in the dim light. However, the 2012 lighting simulation showed that the position where Butler claimed to be standing could not possibly have provided a clear view of a pedestrian more than 12–15 meters away at that time. The path Butler said he observed Lydia on lay in near total darkness, covered by tree shadows with no direct light source. The simulated brightness levels indicated that spotting a person in dark blue clothing under those conditions was highly unlikely, almost impossible. This led the team to note, Butler's statement is inconsistent with actual lighting conditions. The second step was movement speed analysis. The GIS team reconstructed the route from where Lydia separated from her friends to the school backyard parking lot. This determined that an average walking speed of 1.4–1.6 m per s would take about 3.54 minutes to cover the distance. If Lydia left the festival around 10:55 p.m., she would be expected to reach the parking lot before 11 p.m. However, the time Butler claimed to encounter her fell between 11 o'clock, 11:05 p.m., discrepant from the time Lydia left her friends according to Marcy and Ellen's statements. Though small, this discrepancy was enough to create a contradiction. When simulating Butler's movement timing, the team found that if Butler was truly on cleanup duty as he claimed, he could not have been in 2 locations nearly 180 meters apart within a 5–7-minute window. In particular, if he was in the stage area for cleanup, as Dan Wilson vaguely confirmed, he could hardly have been at the turn to the parking lot when he encountered Lydia. The distances and timings did not match. From this, the team preliminarily concluded Butler's alibi is questionable due to inconsistency with movement speed analysis. The third step was reconstructing Lydia's likely directions using a least resistance path model, analyzing natural routes based on terrain and lighting. The results showed Lydia was most likely to follow the paved path and turn right toward the parking lot. However, the model also indicated that if she felt unsafe or noticed someone at the turn, she might choose the eastern direction, a flatter route with less tree cover and closer to residential areas. This aligned with the anonymous edited map, where Zone A was marked as a reasonable but unsearched direction. When the team overlaid Wells's original map onto the 2012 geographic simulation, the discrepancies became obvious. The entire eastern area, where the behavior model indicated the most likely direction, if Lydia altered her route, was crossed out in the 1976 original map. completely excluded from the search. The edited map from the email opened this direction, with the note primary zone, matching modern analysis. This prompted the team to note the 1976 map shows signs of being directed by incomplete data. Finally, the team compared the timestamp of Butler leaving the stage area per Dan Wilson's statement with the simulated movement from the stage to the location in the anonymous photo. The model showed that for Butler to appear exactly where the photo was taken, in the simulated time frame, he would have had to leave the stage area at least 10-12 minutes earlier than he claimed, and then Wilson estimated. This meant the 1976 alibi, already recorded by Wells without sufficient objectivity, collapsed under 2012 analytical technology. When synthesizing the three datasets, lighting, geography, and movement speed, the analysis report's conclusion stated clearly. Butler's statement contradicts the actual conditions of the night of the incident. The original search map contains serious errors. The eastern direction is a reasonable movement route, but was excluded without basis. This conclusion was forwarded to Wenatchee PD and Chelan County in the first week of February 2012, raising the first major question since 1976. Was that year's search deliberately misdirected? And if so, by whom? The investigation team stopped there, while the involved agencies prepared the next step, re-examining all of Butler's statements based on the newly reconstructed empirical data. In early March 2012, after the timeline reconstruction report highlighted serious contradictions between Clayton Butler's statements and the geographic lighting movement simulations, Wenatchee PD, in coordination with Chelan County, launched a full re-interview of all 1976 witnesses using modern investigative interviewing techniques, including the cognitive interview and structured recall methods, which allow for a more detailed reconstruction of memories compared to the old linear interrogation process. Lydia's group of friends was interviewed first. Marcy Turner, who had previously stated that Lydia left the group to head to the parking lot, this time, when asked to describe the path based on sequential visual landmarks, said that she was not sure if Lydia went straight, and only remembered Lydia walking quickly and looking to the left once. This was completely contrary to the 1976 record, which stated that Lydia went straight toward the parking lot and did not turn. Upon deeper interviewing, Marcy admitted that in 1976, she did not think that detail was important because the police only asked which direction Lydia went, not about her demeanor. This was a detail that emerged for the first time after 36 years. Ellen Ruiz, in the memory restructuring interview, also stated that she had a feeling Lydia hesitated for a few seconds before separating from the group, as if she saw someone or something ahead. These details, although not independent evidence, matched the analysis team's behavioral simulation. If Lydia changed direction or turned east, she may have reacted to the appearance of a person standing near the turn. In the second interview, Ellen further stated that she did not clearly remember where Butler was standing that night. While the 1976 record noted that Ellen confirmed Butler was in the cleanup area, Ellen insisted she had never said that, meaning the information about Butler's location did not come from the Friends group but was incorrectly recorded in the original file. When Ellen's and Marcy's statements were cross-referenced, the investigation team marked this as an origin contradiction. Next, the investigation team re-interviewed the 1976 festival volunteers. Dan Wilson, the volunteer team manager at the time, was asked to describe the events in a detailed timeline format. This time, with open-ended questioning techniques, Dan admitted that he did not personally see Butler present in the assembly area at 11:30. He only assumed Butler was there because he usually stayed the latest. This was a critical difference, because in the 1976 record, Dan's confirmation was recorded as Butler was present at the assembly area at 11:30 p.m. Dan's shift from saw to assumed rendered Butler's alibi confirmation worthless. Two other volunteers, who had previously stated they saw Butler in the cleanup area near the stage after 11 o'clock, when re-interviewed using spatial memory reconstruction methods, said they only saw a man in dark clothing from a distance, possibly Butler, possibly someone else. No one confirmed the identity. Thus, Butler's entire 1976 alibi, based on weak, unverified confirmations, began to lose credibility. When compiling the new statements, the investigation team created a contradiction table, including 1. Both Marcy and Ellen described Lydia possibly turning or reacting to someone, contrary to the old record, stating she went straight. 2. No witness confirmed seeing Butler in the assembly area during the time he claimed. 3. The 1976 record stated Dan Wilson confirmed Butler's location, while Dan insisted he never said that. 4. Some details recording the Friends group saw Butler in the cleanup area did not match their actual statements. In that context, Butler was invited for a procedural re-interview. Initially, he agreed to meet but requested his attorney be present. The session took place in Spokane on March 12, 2012. When the investigator presented the 1976 lighting simulation and asked why he said he saw Lydia walking in dim light, Butler replied that memories may have faded. When asked about the anonymous photo showing him in the eastern area, Butler denied it. "That's not me." However, when asked to describe the exact time he left the stage area, he gave a completely different time from his 1976 statement, saying possibly 11 o'clock or later, continuing to mismatch any previous timeline. The ongoing contradictions in his statements led the session to conclude with a key note: Butler's statements inconsistent, varying by question. By late March, after cross-referencing all newly collected data, Wenatchee PD officially designated Clayton Butler as the primary suspect in Lydia Harmon's disappearance. This was the first time in 36 years that his name appeared in the file, not as a witness, but as a subject requiring deep investigation. Just days after that decision, as the re-investigation file had just been updated, and the team was preparing to move to the physical evidence verification phase, Wenatchee PD received an unexpected call from a middle-aged man, identifying himself as Jonah Marino, 58 years old, currently living in Yakima. It included numerous markings in the eastern area, particularly a path connecting the school backyard to a series of vacant lots extending toward sparser residential zones. This area was encircled by 3 small red circles, along with handwritten notes in black pen: primary zone and not searched. Some markings even indicated turning points and intersections between main paths and side trails that the 1976 map never mentioned. Caleb zoomed in and noticed the handwriting was bold, slightly slanted to the right, looking like quick notes from someone familiar with topographic maps. The email provided no explanation of who drew this map, but it clearly showed a completely different search scope from what was reported during the initial investigation. Caleb cross-checked Chelan County's public records, the documents digitized after 1995, and confirmed that the attached map was not in any official archived file. This made the email far more significant. If this map truly existed in 1976, but was never used or disclosed, it meant Lydia's disappearance was not thoroughly searched from the start. Caleb printed the map and placed it next to Wells's official one for comparison. The differences became increasingly clear. The new map fully opened the eastern area. The old one crossed it out. The new map had a note to Zone A, right next to the eastern fence of the school backyard, exactly the route Lydia might have taken if she changed her mind or wanted to avoid the dark path to the parking lot. Wells's map completely ignored this route, as if it was never considered a possible direction. Caleb jotted this down in his notebook and reread the email. At the end, the sender wrote, "No one ever searched the right direction. Time to revisit." Butler knows. The name Butler made Caleb pause. He remembered Clayton Butler, who had appeared in some local articles in the late 1990s, when his private investigation firm in Spokane started gaining notice in high-profile civil surveillance cases. Caleb did not know how Butler was connected to this map, but having his name mentioned in an anonymous email about a disappearance over 35 years old was a detail that could not be ignored. Caleb pinned the map on his office board next to a copied old article about Butler from the newspaper's archives. The sudden appearance of this new map especially with clear notes about an unsearched area, had brought the Lydia case, silent for decades, back into full suspicion. Caleb wrote in his notes, "If this map is real, the entire 1976 search direction is problematic." This was the last note he made that day before starting to consider contacting relevant agencies to verify the authenticity of the document sent by the anonymous source. Just 2 days after receiving the mysterious alternate map, on the morning of January 5, 2012, as Caleb Price was reviewing his notes in his office at the Spokane Ledger, a second anonymous email suddenly appeared in his inbox. It had no clear subject line, just the words, "Look at this." Unlike the first email, this one went straight to the point, a PNG image attachment, and a short paragraph, "He was there. East direction, not north. This is proof." Caleb opened the image, a faded color photo, apparently taken with a 1970s film camera, appeared on the screen. In the foreground was the old metal fence of the Lewis and Clark Elementary School backyard. In the middle of the frame under tree cover stood a man in a thick dark brown jacket, alone next to the path leading into the eastern vacant land. His face was not looking directly at the lens, but the features, posture, and hair made Caleb recognize him immediately. It was Clayton Butler, from right around 1976. Caleb zoomed in to pinpoint the location. Jonah could not confirm it was Butler because the person always wore a hat and glasses, but he said, "I felt I could not reveal anything." The 2012 investigation team carefully considered this statement. The detail of Butler leaving the search team in a different direction perfectly matched the edited map in the anonymous email, the map marking Zone A in the northeast, an area the 1976 team never reached. Butler's disappearance from the team for nearly half an hour also fit the movement time simulation, allowing him to be at the location of the anonymous photo. Moreover, Butler threatening Jonah reinforced suspicions that Butler wanted to control information about his movements on the first search day. When asked why he decided to speak after 36 years, Jonah said the anonymous email appearing in local media and leaked new information made him realize someone was finally touching the truth. He stated, "I've kept this too long. I always knew something was wrong since 1976. The investigation team immediately marked Jonah's statement as particularly significant as it provided 3 unprecedented elements: 1, confirmation that Butler separated from the group in a direction the search never covered; 2, support for the hypothesis that the search map was misdirected from day 1; and 3, evidence that Butler actively threatened a witness to control information. Jonah's emergence after 36 years became the most important turning point since the Lydia Harmon file was closed in 1976. With this statement, Butler shifted from potential suspect to primary suspect, and his behavior during the 1976 search operation was re-examined from a completely new perspective, no longer mere oversight, but signs of intentional interference and concealment. As Jonah Marino's interview was nearing its end, he unexpectedly asked the investigation team for a few private minutes to show them something he had kept too long. Jonah opened the old backpack he brought and placed on the table 3 items individually wrapped in paper bags: a faded notebook, a folded hand-drawn map on paper, and a small nylon bag containing a tarnished silver metal object. He slowly explained that these were items he had stored since 1976, never shown to anyone because he didn't trust anyone would understand at the time. The first item was a pocket-sized notebook with a steel spiral binding, pages yellowed with age. Jonah explained that during the first search, he recorded marking points to avoid repeating routes, a habit he learned from his father for wilderness travel. When the team opened the notebook, they saw a series of simple symbols, arrows, X marks, and very short terrain descriptions. But what drew attention was page 6, dated 15/8, with the note B separated from team direction SENE 20-25 minutes. Below the note was an arrow pointing northeast, matching the starting point of Zone A on the anonymous map. Jonah said he recorded this not to accuse, but to remember where a team member had turned. But right after, Butler asked him not to mention it again. Jonah intended to tear out the page, but ultimately just lightly crossed it out, folded the notebook, and kept it among other pages for 36 years. The second item, what Jonah called what scared him most, was a pencil sketch map on old-school paper. When the team unfolded it, the map clearly showed 6 small trails and 2 turns leading deep into the eastern wilderness. This map was completely different from Wells's 1976 map, but approximately 80% similar to the map attached to the anonymous email Caleb Price received. Even more shocking was the note in the corner, "See Butler, draft." Jonah said this map was not drawn by him, but given by Butler to the team on the morning of August 15/8, with the explanation, "These are side paths I've been on." However, the team leader did not use it, believing Wells had the official map. Jonah kept it because it felt strange, especially since Butler claimed to know every branch in the north, despite few locals venturing there. When comparing this sketch map to Caleb's anonymous map, the team noted significant similarity. The Zone A and Not Searched markings on the anonymous map appeared based on Butler's sketch, only differing in heavier marking of the eastern area. The third item in the nylon bag, the one that kept Jonah silent for over 3 decades, was a broken silver bracelet. The heart-shaped part snapped in half. Jonah explained he found it on the afternoon of August 16, 1976, while the search team swept near the Northeast Trail. He said it was under dry leaves, only a metallic glint visible. Jonah picked it up, intending to report it to the team leader, but Butler, who had just returned from the north, saw the small object in Jonah's hand and immediately said, "Not related, kids often drop things while playing." Jonah recounted that Butler took the item from his hand for a few seconds, examined it, then returned it hastily, reminding Jonah, "No need to give it to Wells and complicate things." But Jonah, feeling uneasy, secretly pocketed it in his jacket and forgot about it amid starting college. He only stored it in a drawer when leaving Wenatchee at year's end. When asked why he never turned it over to police in 36 years, Jonah said initially he thought it unrelated, but many nights later he thought it didn't seem like a child's item. In 1980, he happened to see an old news clipping about Lydia in a library and realized Lydia wore a silver heart bracelet, a detail her family had described. Jonah said, "When I realized that, I panicked. I was afraid Butler knew I still had it." The investigation team immediately placed the item in a new evidence bag, resealed it, and coded it per modern procedure. The bracelet fragment instantly became the first physical evidence directly linking Lydia to the eastern area, the direction the 1976 map completely ignored. Jonah's notebook, Butler's sketch map, and the bracelet fragment had existed for nearly half a lifetime unknown to anyone. All 3 pieces of evidence cast suspicion on Butler's actions, reinforcing that in 1976, he not only separated toward an unsearched area, but had his own map and handled evidence related to Lydia. At the end of the session, the team noted in the report, "Evidence provided by Jonah completely changes the case structure. All 3 match 2012 reconstruction data and contradict Wells's record." This was the greatest advance since the Lydia Harmon case was closed, and the first time investigators saw that the 1976 picture may have been manipulated in ways no one anticipated. In the second week of April 2012, immediately after receiving the notebook, sketch map, and bracelet fragment provided by Jonah Marino, Spokane PD, in coordination with Wenatchee PD and the Chelan County Sheriff's Office, held a nearly 6-hour interagency meeting to compile all data related to the Lydia Harmon case, including the original 1976 file, the 2 anonymous emails, the photo of Butler in the overlooked area, the 2012 lighting terrain time simulations, and the 3 pieces of evidence Jonah had kept for 36 years. The meeting quickly shifted from reviewing new information to reopening as a criminal investigation when the nature of the data was deemed inexplicable by simple procedural error, but showing signs of intentional interference in the initial search scope. In the first compilation step, the team created a historical timeline list of facts, separating all information into 4 groups: 1 original 1976 data, 2 contradictions arising from 2012 witness re-interviews, 3 technical data from lighting terrain simulations, and 4 newly emerged physical evidence. The team specially marked contradictions. Butler claimed only to be in the cleanup area, but lighting simulations showed he could not see Lydia from there. Butler's stated times did not match the movement speed needed to appear in the anonymous photo. Wells' 1976 map excluded the eastern area without basis, while Butler's sketch retained all trails there. Jonah recorded Butler separating northeast, matching Zone A, and most critically, Lydia's bracelet was found exactly on the trail Butler called unrelated. From these data, the team decided to create a unified timeline. A comprehensive reconstructed timeline merging statements, physical evidence, field analysis, and previously undisclosed facts. The unified timeline began at the moment Lydia separated from her friends at 2255 on August 14, 1976. Based on lighting simulations, the team marked the area Lydia entered as nearly complete darkness. Based on Marcy's added statement, Lydia looked left once, and Ellen's description of Lydia seemingly hesitating, the timeline determined Lydia may have noticed someone standing near the turn. The 2012 anonymous photo showing Butler in the marked Zone A area was inserted into the timeline here as fitting Lydia's reaction behavior. Movement speed simulation data indicated Lydia may have gone east instead of straight. This was the step the 1976 timeline completely ignored. Next, the unified timeline marked the 11:05, 11:10 event. Butler could not simultaneously be in the cleanup area and at the eastern turn as he claimed. Jonah's notebook recorded Butler separating northeast on the morning of August 15, the unsearched area. When Butler's sketch map was placed in the timeline, the team realized Butler had specific knowledge of eastern trails, knowledge absent from the 1976 record. The timeline was also supplemented with Lydia's bracelet at the ESNE side trail position, proving the victim had been in the eastern area, a fact completely contradicting the 1976 search conclusion that no evidence Lydia went this way. By the end of the meeting, the team completed the unified timeline 1976-2012, containing 46 main data points. Most of them highlighted one standout conclusion: Butler not only provided inaccurate statements, but his presence in key overlooked areas and the new evidence all pointed to suspicion that he intentionally misdirected the search. Comparing Butler's sketch map to the anonymous map also showed near-perfect overlap, leading the team to note the possibility that the email sender had direct or indirect past contact with Butler or access to documents only 1976 search team members would have. When all data were presented in the official report, Spokane PD and Wenatchee PD concluded the case fully met Washington state standards for reopening new physical evidence, new witness statements, and evidence of serious inaccuracies in the old file. The next step was to request search warrants. The team identified 2 locations: one Butler Investigations Office in Spokane, the headquarters of Butler's private investigation firm operating over 30 years, 2 Butler's personal residence in Spokane Valley. The warrant request focused on 3 items: documents related to Wenatchee 1976, old terrain maps or trail sketches, and potential evidence related to Lydia. In particular, the team emphasized the eastern area file to find any trace proving Butler concealed information. The warrant request report, over 30 pages, was submitted to Chelan County Superior Court on April 12, 2012. It clearly stated, new facts collected in 2012 indicate suspect Clayton Butler likely provided false statements and influenced the 1976 search scope. Searching his office and residence is necessary to collect additional documents related to the Lydia Harmon case. With the submission of the search warrant request, Spokane PD officially reopened the case under a new investigation code, marking the greatest turning point in the case since it was closed in October 1976. On the morning of April 18, 2012, Shortly after the search warrant was approved by the Chelan County Superior Court, the Spokane PD, in coordination with the Wenatchee PD, deployed an investigative team to the headquarters of Butler Investigations, a modest two-story office located on an old commercial road in Spokane. Butler was not present when the warrant was executed. The receptionist was asked to leave the area while the investigators conducted the search according to proper procedure. The office was divided into 4 areas: the reception room, a shared workspace, a records room, and Butler's private office. The investigative team began in the records room. Old boxes of documents containing surveillance contracts and operational notes yielded no information relevant to the Lydia case. However, an unlabeled box of files in the far corner caught the investigators' attention. Inside were numerous faded topographic maps, most of them covering central Washington forest areas, but 3 maps were heavily marked in pencil: Riverfront Park, the backyard of Lewis and Clark Elementary School, and the routes connecting to the undeveloped land to the east. These markings were strikingly similar to those appearing on the anonymous map sent to Caleb Price, particularly the 3 small circles labeled Zone A, the northeast pointing arrow, and the note not marked. Another map even had a small note, "Shortcut, few people know." This was the first indication that Butler had retained maps of areas he had previously denied, knowing well in the 1976 records. Moving to the private office, the investigators had to use lock-picking tools when they discovered a small safe under the desk. Inside the safe were 12 document envelopes sealed in moisture-proof plastic. The third envelope contained a series of developed film photographs, mostly of terrain. Among them were 3 photos of the area east of the school backyard, taken around the late 1970s, identified by the film stock and fading. What immediately flagged the team was a photo showing an object partially visible under dry leaves, which, when enlarged, matched the bracelet fragment that Jonah had turned over. Butler had been to the exact location where the evidence appeared, photographed it, but never reported it. In the 5th envelope, the investigators found Butler's handwritten notes, a list of 5 coordinates on the low mountain slope northeast of Wenatchee. Some quick lines: soft ascent, loose rocks, careful, good hiding spot. Although the purpose of these notes could not yet be determined, the investigative team immediately flagged them because the coordinates matched a remote hilly area about 3 kilometers from the 1976 search zone, an area never mentioned in any records. However, the most critical evidence was not in the safe, but found in a small wooden box on a high shelf next to old badges from Butler's time as a volunteer. A women's silver necklace with a thin chain and a flower-shaped pendant scratched on the edge. The investigator opened the original 1976 Lydia photo file, the only photo provided by the family in the missing person report. In the photo, Lydia was wearing a necklace that was extremely similar: thin chain, small flower pendant, a common design of the era but with a distinctive offset notch on the right side. The necklace seized from Butler's office had this exact notch. When examined under a magnifying glass, the back of the pendant revealed very small engraved initials: Lydia Harmon's initials. The 1976 report had noted that Lydia was wearing a bracelet and small silver necklace, but without detailed description. The match between the evidence found in Butler's office and Lydia's described item was a complete turning point in the investigation. In the final envelope from the safe, the team discovered a handwritten note with the words 15/8. No context, no description, but when placed alongside the maps, photos, and evidence just found, this note became a chilling piece of the puzzle. Once all the evidence was seized and sealed, the Spokane PD completed a preliminary report. Seized evidence directly related to Lydia Harmon, including personal necklace and maps of search areas, excluded in 1976. Data strengthened suspicion that Butler was present at the location where evidence appeared and retained documents never provided to police. The discovery of Lydia's necklace in Butler's office, the first evidence directly linking him to the victim in a way that could not be reasonably explained by any professional reason, shifted the case from suspicion to mandatory action. Within hours of completing the search, the Spokane PD transferred all evidence to forensics and issued a recommendation: Butler had now become a primary suspect with physical evidence capable of proving direct involvement in Lydia Harmon's disappearance. On the morning of April 20, 2012, just 2 days after the search of Butler investigations and the seizure of the necklace engraved LH, along with numerous documents, maps, and photos directly linking to the area overlooked in the 1976 search, the Spokane PD and Wenatchee PD jointly obtained an emergency arrest warrant for Clayton Butler on grounds of suspicion of involvement in the disappearance of a minor and withholding material evidence. The warrant was approved by a Chelan County Superior Court judge that same morning, emphasizing the severity of the newly discovered evidence. The arrest team, consisting of 4 Spokane PD officers and 2 Wenatchee investigators, approached Butler's private residence in Spokane Valley at 9:12 a.m. Butler was preparing to leave the house, wearing a jacket and holding car keys, when he saw patrol vehicles blocking the driveway. The lead officer read the warrant, instructing Butler to put down the keys and turn around. Butler reacted slowly but complied, asking, "What's going on? I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's response was just 3 words, "The 1976 case." Butler immediately appeared tense, but did not resist as he was handcuffed and placed in the police vehicle. During the transport to Spokane PD, he said nothing further. At headquarters, Butler was taken to Interrogation Room 3, a room reserved for serious cases. He was provided an attorney upon request. While Butler was held pending interrogation procedures, the investigative team completed sealing all evidence seized from his office. The necklace, hand-drawn maps, film photos of the eastern area, coordinate notes on the mountain slope, and Butler's hand-drawn maps were all categorized and barcoded under modern CVE protocols. The most critical item, the necklace engraved LH, was placed in a separate evidence box, triple-sealed and transported directly to the Washington State Forensics Lab via priority route for serious case evidence. Concurrently, Wenatchee PD opened a new case file coded 2012 SHE-LH, marking this as the official reinvestigation file, completely separate from the 1976 file that had been closed for 36 years. In the new file, the evidence from Butler's office was entered under recovered property, with direct victim linkage, the first such entry in the case's history. A veteran Spokane PD investigator commented, "There is no legitimate reason for him to have kept a missing girl's necklace." At the same time, Chelan County investigators re-verified the items Jonah had turned over, the bracelet fragment, notebook, and sketch map. All matched the data seized from Butler's office, especially the pencil strokes on the maps and the unusually identical arrow symbols. When comparing Butler's retained maps with the anonymous photo and edited map sent to Caleb Price, the team noted, same origin, likely drawn by the same person. All these coincidences were entered into the new file, strengthening the basis for Butler's arrest and interrogation. By early afternoon, after completing detention procedures, Butler was brought into the interrogation room. His attorney demanded full disclosure of the arrest grounds, but the investigator only read the permissible portion, seizure of property belonging to Lydia Harmon. Timeline contradictions in the 1976 statement, and discovery of maps not in the original file. Butler remained completely silent, answering no questions, only staring at his hands on the table. Meanwhile, the team prepared a full evidence board, placed in the Spokane PD evidence storage room. This was the first time in 36 years that the Lydia Harmon case had direct physical evidence. By late afternoon, all evidence was transported by specialized vehicle to the Washington State Forensics Lab in Olympia. Each evidence package was labeled Priority Processing due to its connection to a decades-long unsolved disappearance. Butler, now formally detained for 48 hours, was transferred to the temporary holding area at Spokane County Jail, awaiting further interrogation and review by the Chelan County prosecutor. In the end-of-day report, the lead investigator wrote, "Evidence seized from Butler's office establishes direct connection between him and Lydia, inexplicable by professional activity. Investigation shifts to phase verifying victim location." This was a critical turning point, marking the moment the Lydia Harmon case moved from a stagnant cold file to an active criminal investigation, with a formally detained primary suspect and tightly sealed physical evidence in the 2012 file. The first interrogation session took place on the morning of April 21, 2012, in Spokane PD's Interrogation Room 3, less than 24 hours after Butler's arrest. On the table were copies of the 1976 file, notes from witnesses re-interviewed in 2012, and a report reconstructing the timeline using light geography movement simulation techniques. The lead investigator began by asking Butler to explain his entire route on the night of August 14, 1976, from the moment he left the stage area until he left the park. Butler, maintaining a restrained and cautious demeanor, repeated almost verbatim his 1976 statement. He said he was coiling cables in the stage area, saw Lydia pass by around 23 o'clock, then returned to the rally point to sign out, and left the festival at 23:30. But the investigator immediately cross-referenced each detail with the 2012 analysis. Light simulation showed that from the position Butler claimed to be in, he could not clearly see a pedestrian 15 meters away, especially if wearing dark clothing like Lydia. Movement speed simulation indicated Butler could not have both packed equipment and appeared at the exact time he claimed to see Lydia, based on when her friends left the stage. And geographic reconstruction showed the route Butler described did not match any reasonable movement pattern under that night's lighting conditions. When asked to explain why his statement did not align with the physical simulations, Butler responded evasively, "It's been too long. I don't remember clearly," completely contradicting the certainty he had shown in the 1976 records. The investigator did not stop there but moved to challenging the alibi. Dan Wilson had vaguely confirmed Butler's presence at the rally point at 23:30, but the other two witnesses said they did not clearly see the person they thought was Butler. This was presented in focused questions. Do you have any evidence you were at the rally point at the time you claimed? Butler paused for a few seconds, then said, "I believe I was there. I still remember signing the log." The investigator placed a copy of the 1976 sign-out log in front of Butler. None of the signatures included times, and nothing confirmed Butler signed within the window, he stated. When asked to describe the equipment packing process again, Butler gave a general list lacking details, which the investigator needed only to compare with the event organizer's log to prove Butler had misdescribed the type of equipment used in the 1976 festival. This was the first clear contradiction. The second contradiction emerged when the investigator showed Butler the anonymous photo of a man standing near the Eastern Fork, matching Butler's 1976 appearance. Butler denied it. "That's not me. Someone is trying to frame me." The investigator continued. "In this photo, the man is standing exactly where the 2012 simulation determines Lydia likely turned. How do you explain that?" Butler only replied, "It has nothing to do with me." But when asked to describe his clothing that day, Butler said he believed he wore a gray jacket. In the original file, his statement recorded brown jacket. This change, seemingly minor, became pivotal when cross-referenced with the anonymous photo. The man wore a dark jacket, closely matching the 1976 description, but nothing like the gray Butler now claimed. The third contradiction was clarified when the investigator asked, "Why were you in the eastern area, a region you said you didn't know?" Butler answered quickly, "I was never there." But the investigator followed up by presenting Butler's hand-drawn sketch map, seized from his office, marked with Eastern Trails and labeled C. Butler, draft. At this point, Butler's attorney intervened, arguing the document's date had not been authenticated. However, the investigator simply asked, "Do you deny drawing this map?" Butler looked at the map for a few seconds, then said, "I don't remember anything about it." This was the third major contradiction, as Butler had previously insisted he had no knowledge of the Eastern Trails. Next, the investigator presented Jonah Marino's details, Butler separating from the search team for 25 minutes toward the east-northeast. Butler reacted more strongly. I never did that. That person is making it up. But when shown Jonah's notebook, specifically noting B, separated team direction ENE, Butler could not explain why Jonah, a person he had denied knowing well, described details matching the map he had kept for years. The final part of the session used movement reconstruction data. If Butler left the stage area at the time he claimed, he could not appear in the photo, or be at the location where Lydia's bracelet fragment was found. When asked why the simulation proved he could not be in two places separated by the time and distance he described, Butler only said, "I don't know what a computer simulation does, but my memory is my memory." This only made his timeline contradictions clearer. The interrogation ended after more than 3 hours, with a key note in the report. Butler denies all allegations but cannot explain timeline, location, and physical evidence contradictions. Statements inconsistent, shifting with questions. This marked the shift of Butler from primary suspect to a subject requiring deeper interrogation and expanded evidence comparison. The second interrogation session took place in the afternoon of April 22, 2012, less than 24 hours after the first, when the investigation team determined that Clayton Butler was clinging to an old chain of statements that had completely lost all credibility in the face of new analytical data and physical evidence. This time, the interrogation strategy was completely adjusted. Instead of sequential questioning, as in the 1976 record, the team applied the cutting support points method, presenting visual evidence, placing Butler in front of undeniable truths, forcing him to respond in real time without the opportunity to shift the story toward ambiguity. To open, the investigator projected on a large screen the anonymous 2012 photo, showing Butler standing alone at the Eastern Fork, in the exact area excluded from the 1976 search map. Although Butler had denied it in the previous session, this time, the photo was enlarged and compared side by side with a 1976 photo of Butler archived by the festival organizers. Hairstyle, hair length, posture, head tilt, angle, and even the crease in the jacket sleeve were completely identical. The investigator asked, "Are you going to continue saying that the person in the photo is not you?" Butler stared at the photo longer than usual, his eyes showing defensiveness, then replied, "Not clear. The photo is blurry. Anyone could be standing there." The investigator did not respond, but moved to the second slide, an enlarged image of the wrist in the photo. Though it did not show the face, the left hand in the photo had a round callus scar, a distinctive injury Butler had suffered from a 1975 cable accident, recorded in his volunteer file. When the callus was magnified on the screen, Butler's lawyer requested a pause, but the investigator only said, "If this is not you, then how many people in Wenatchee, in 1976, had a callus matching the position, size, and shape exactly?" Butler did not answer. Next, the investigator projected a 1976 lighting simulation, a 3D model showing that the position Butler claimed to be standing in could not have allowed him to see Lydia in the darkness. As the model shifted scenes, displaying the 23 o'clock time under faint crescent moonlight, Butler clenched his hands, the first sign of losing control. The investigator continued, "You said you saw Lydia walking straight ahead, but we simulated the brightness, and no one in your circumstances could see beyond 12 meters. How do you explain that?" Butler bowed his head for a second, then repeated the old line. "Memory is not perfect," but the investigator immediately countered, "Memory is not perfect, yet it matches word for word with the 1976 record, while every other witness remembers differently when re-interviewed." Butler fell silent, sensing that he was starting to lose the ability to maintain the story's coherence. The investigator shifted to the strongest chain of evidence, the Jonah evidence. First was the notebook. The investigator placed it in front of Butler, turning to the page noting, "Separated from team heading ESNE 20, 25 minutes, so he could see clearly." Butler took a sharp breath but still said, "I never separated from the team. Someone made that up." The investigator did not argue, simply presenting two hand-drawn sketch maps seized from Butler's office. When the two maps were placed next to Jonah's notebook, Butler became visibly tense, chest heaving, eyes darting continuously. The investigator continues, "You said you knew nothing about the eastern trails. But you have maps more detailed than any Wells ever used. You drew them, annotated them, tracked them." Butler reacted, "Those are just professional documents. I collected them later." The investigator immediately asked, "Then why was this sketch paper analyzed and determined to be of a type used before 1980? And why do the wood fibers in the paper match the type from Wenatchee schools in 1976? Butler could not answer, but the step that caused him to completely lose the ability to maintain the old story was when the investigator brought out the final piece of evidence, the fragment of Lydia's bracelet that Jonah found in 1976, placed next to the film photo Butler took of the bracelet fragment before touching it. The investigator asked, "If you did not leave the search line, why were you able to photograph the bracelet fragment in an area the search team had never reached? And why did you tell Jonah that the item was not relevant and ask him to keep quiet?" Butler looked up. "I don't remember this photo. Maybe someone put it in my office." The investigator presented the analysis report of remaining fingerprints on the back of the film photo, prints matching 11 points with Butler's from the 1976 volunteer file. At this point, Butler's lawyer tried to request ending the session, but the investigator stated clearly, "Mr. Butler, your fingerprints on the photo, the maps you drew, Lydia's chain in your office. And you appeared in the area you claimed never to have gone to. What more do you want to deny?" Butler began to lose composure, voice rising. "You're setting everything up. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to help. I don't know where the girl went." The investigator immediately seized the moment, lowering his voice, "Then why do you have her chain?" Butler froze. This was the question he had no way to evade. He looked down at the table, hands trembling slightly. After a moment, the answer came out, vague and halting. "I didn't take it. I found it, somewhere." "I don't remember," the investigator pressed. "Where? In the woods? In your car? On you?" Butler did not answer. He propped his elbows on the table, rubbing his temples, as if trying to hold together a collapsing story. The investigator shifted the attack to the alibi. "You said you were at the assembly point at 23:30, but Dan Wilson admitted he never saw you that night. Two other witnesses said they only saw a man in a dark jacket. Time simulation shows you could not be in the two positions you described. And now we know you were in the northeast area for 25 minutes. Why?" Butler, for the first time in the two sessions, completely lost control of his expression. He said loudly, "I don't remember. I don't remember. I tried to forget all of that." The investigator stared at him. "You cannot forget what you did not do." That statement made Butler freeze, as if he had just been struck at his deepest psychological weakness. He breathed rapidly, eyes reddening, no longer maintaining the initial defensive posture. The lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but Butler brushed it off, not looking at anyone. The session ended with an important note in the record. Suspect no longer able to maintain consistency of original statement, showing strong psychological reactions when confronted with visual evidence and physical items. Responses contradictory, constantly shifting. First admission of not remembering appearance location, and not denying maps, photos, evidence. This was the interrogation that turned Butler from a person denying all involvement into one completely surrounded by data, evidence, and irreversible truth. The story he had built over 36 years began to collapse right in the Spokane PD interrogation room. The interrogation on the morning of April 23, 2012, began in heavy silence, lasting nearly 2 minutes, with only the soft ticking of the recording device. Butler sat lower than the day before, back no longer straight, hands clasped in front but constantly clenching and unclenching, signs of psychological collapse after failing to maintain the old story. The lead investigator opened the session by placing the chain bearing the initials LH on the table, turning the silver flower pendant toward Butler. No accusation, just one slow question. Where did you find it? Butler stared at the evidence for a long time, breathing heavy and abnormally rapid. When the investigator continued, "And why was it in your office after 36 years?" Butler placed both hands on his forehead, trembling slightly. This psychological step, completely cutting off defensive capability and forcing the subject to directly confront evidence linked to the victim, caused Butler to no longer evade as he had the day before. When the investigator moved to the film photo of the bracelet fragment in the dry leaves and asked, "If you did not go to that area, who took this photo with your camera?" Butler groaned softly, then muttered the first confessional statement, "I didn't think things would go this far." The investigator did not interrupt, only lowering his voice. "You need to tell the truth now. This is the only moment you can control it." For the first time in the 2 sessions, Butler broke down in tears, silently but clearly. After the lawyer calmed him, and Butler agreed to continue, the investigator posed the direct question, "Where is Lydia Harmon?" Butler closed his eyes for a few seconds, then delivered the answer that nearly froze the entire interrogation room. "I left her in Little Wenatchee, the rock crevice north of the trail." The investigator asked him to clarify, without pressure, without interrupting. Butler wiped his face, then began describing in a fragmented but consistent way, as if memories compressed for many years were surfacing. He said that on the night of August 14, 1976, after Lydia left her group of friends, he accidentally encountered her at the Eastern Fork area. He claimed to have had a short conversation with Lydia, but a dispute occurred, and she ran into the wilderness. Butler followed because he feared she would fall. But the incident happened faster than he expected. When the investigator asked him to describe the exact location, Butler provided a terrain description more detailed than any map the police had ever had. From the Eastern Fork, go straight about 80 meters, there's a large tree struck by lightning and broken pale white like bone. Veer left to a small trail leading up a slope. Past the slope is an open rock crevice, about 4 meters long, nearly 2 deep. I left her there. The investigator recorded everything, but Butler did not stop. He described how he concealed the body, a thin layer of soil, rock fragments, dry branches. Butler clearly stated that this crevice was about 30 meters from the main trail but hidden under tree roots and large rocks. Very hard to detect if you don't know it's there. The investigator asked, "Why did you choose that spot?" Butler replied, voice almost a whisper, "Because no one went in that direction. Everyone looked north. I knew Wells would choose that direction. I just needed to make sure no one turned east." This statement was immediately noted in the file, as it perfectly matched the entire misdirection in the 1976 map, and Jonah Marino's statement that Butler had fixed the search direction. When the investigator asked about the sketch maps found in the office, Butler explained that they were ones he drew to remember the way, in case he needed to return. This nearly confirmed to the investigation team that Butler had returned to the Little Wenatchee area multiple times after the incident, though he did not specify the purpose. Next, the investigator asked about how Butler diverted the search. Butler admitted to deliberately suggesting the wrong direction on August 15, 1976, implying Lydia might have gone north by mistake. He said, "I knew if there was something there they would believe it. I left a fabric piece there, not hers. I tore it from my shirt." This matched the 2012 fiber analysis, determining the fabric did not match Lydia's clothing in the final photo. The investigator continued, "And the chain, where did you get it?" Butler was silent for a very long time before answering, "She was wearing it. It fell when everything ended." When asked why he kept the chain for 36 years, Butler shook his head. "I didn't dare throw it away. I didn't dare look at it, but I also couldn't part with it." This was recorded as a psychological factor that could authenticate the statement. Finally, the investigator asked Butler to describe the approach to the crevice at Little Wenatchee. Butler gave details that surprised the team from the main trail. "Take the right fork about 20 meters, follow the exposed root strip, and you will see a natural cluster of rocks sinking down. obscured when viewed from afar. Butler also described two large triangular rocks, like two teeth, forming the recognition marker. He confirmed the body was placed behind these two rocks, in a crevice about shoulder deep. The investigator asked the final question, "Did you ever return to that area after 1976? Butler swallowed hard, then answered, "Yes, a few times. I had to make sure no one went there." The session ended with a special report. Suspect provided body location, terrain description, consistent with analyzed maps, admitted concealment actions, and diversion of search scope. Butler was returned to his cell, while the investigation team prepared to deploy forces to Little Wenatchee River Trail to verify the location that no one had thought to search for over 36 years. On the morning of April 24, 2012, just one day after Butler confessed the burial location of Lydia Harmon's body, a joint forensic team from Spokane PD, Wenatchee PD, and Chelan County was mobilized to Little Wenatchee River Trail, equipped with modern tools including terrain-scanning drones, ground-penetrating radar (GPR), high-precision GPS modules, and specialized excavation tools. The area Butler described was nearly 300 meters from the main trail, on the northern slope, where the terrain was complex with rock layers, tree roots, and natural rock clusters forming many crevices. Before beginning the search, the forensic team operated drones to scan the entire slope face using the coordinates Butler provided. Drone imagery showed an area with two large triangular rocks close together exactly as Butler described, appearing from above, like two rock points protruding from the ground, forming a depression in between. When the drone lowered to 15 meters altitude, technicians noticed a small patch of soil right behind the two rocks, with different soil color, less moss, and inconsistent vegetation patterns compared to the surrounding area. This was the first sign of potential surface soil disturbance. The forensic team marked the area with GPS, then brought GPR to the crevice to scan the subsurface. Radar waves showed an abnormal response pattern at a depth of about 45–60 centimeters, a cluster of material with lower density than the surrounding rock base, in a horizontal structure consistent with cavity disturbance, a void disturbed and refilled. GPR continued scanning in an arc pattern, and results mapped a 3D image showing the disturbed soil area as a small oval, about 1.4 meters long, 0.5 meters wide, dimensions closely corresponding to a teenage body. After identifying this as the most suspicious point, the forensic team proceeded to manually remove the loose rocks on top, avoiding impact to the underlying structure. In just 20 minutes of gentle digging with meticulous tools, the team discovered a layer of intentionally arranged rock fragments, a clear sign of artificial concealment. Tree roots began to appear, broken or snapped vertically, indicating prior disturbance and refilling many years ago. At the second soil layer, the soil shifted from dark brown to pale gray, inconsistent with the area's natural soil, typical sign of manual backfilling. When the third layer was removed, a small piece of decayed fabric appeared, color no longer intact, but fiber structure identified as common cotton polyester blend from the 1970s. The forensic team stopped digging and marked the position for documentation. Continuing down about 10 centimeters, the small bones of the left foot appeared, metatarsal bones still intact though discolored. At that moment, the entire forensic team halted per protocol, erected a tent to cover the area, placed markers, temporarily sealed it, and awaited the chief forensic examiner's confirmation of suspicion level. When the chief arrived, excavation continued with extreme caution. In just 40 minutes, the entire lower body skeletal structure was exposed, positioned correctly lying on its side, head facing north, legs slightly bent, consistent with Butler's description that he placed Lydia in the crevice. The team found a decayed shoe, rubber sole completely disintegrated but style matching, the pair Lydia wore in the 1976 family-provided photo. Next to the right foot was a small metal piece, the remaining part of the broken flower pendant, matching the incomplete chain seized from Butler's office. When digging to the chest and spine bones, The team noted many bones showing compression signs from years of rock pressure, but the skull structure retained overall shape, aiding body identification. Long, dark hair remnants in the soil above the rock layer, tangled in roots, were collected for DNA testing. Finally, when the entire upper body was excavated, the team found a larger fabric piece, the remnant of the t-shirt she wore the night she disappeared, dye-faded but fiber structure, and faint pattern, matching Lydia's clothing description in the 1976 file. At 14:35 on April 24, 2012, the chief forensic examiner declared a complete skeleton recovered, highly likely to be Lydia Harmon. The entire scene was sealed, documented, and the remains transported to the Chelan County lab per protocol for long-term homicide victim remains. After nearly 36 years, Lydia's body location was finally found exactly where Butler described, the northern crevice at Little Wenatchee River Trail, an area the 1976 search never reached because it was misdirected from the start. In just hours, what many generations of investigators thought would never appear had surfaced, irrefutable evidence that Lydia had not simply disappeared, but had been intentionally concealed for decades in the Wenatchee Mountains. The official forensic examination process formally began on the morning of April 25, 2012, at the Chelan County Forensic Facility, where the remains recovered from the rock crevice north of the Little Wenatchee River Trail were transferred under strict preservation conditions. The forensic team, consisting of experts in osteology, DNA analysis, bone surface trace evidence, soft tissue pathology, and injury reconstruction technicians, was assigned to conduct the entire procedure to determine identity, cause of death, and cross-reference all related physical evidence. The opening of the remains package took place under surveillance cameras, with each remaining layer of forest soil collected separately for trace evidence recovery. From the very first minutes, the lead forensic pathologist noted that the skeletal remains were in relatively good preservation condition due to the crevice environment: dry, minimal animal burrowing, stable temperature, and just enough soil cover to prevent complete decomposition. The long bones of the legs, clavicles, arm bones, and pelvic bones retained intact structures, allowing measurements to determine age, sex, and height. Based on pelvic bone size, joint angle opening, and femur length, the experts determined these were the remains of a female, estimated to be 15-18 years old at the time of death, perfectly matching the age of 17 for Lydia Harmon in 1976. Height estimated from the femur and lower leg bones yielded approximately 1.63–1.67 meters, consistent with the family's description in the missing person report. The hair recovered at the scene, though severely decomposed, was still sufficient to extract characteristic keratin markers and later used as supplemental DNA material. However, the most critical part lay in the skull and rib bones. During the 3D CT scan of the skull, the forensic team discovered two abnormal depressed areas, one on the left forehead and one at the back of the head. The forehead depression was semicircular in shape, about 3 centimeters wide with sharp edges, indicating impact from an object with a rounded but heavy edge. The occipital injury showed block-like crushing with radiating fracture lines, a classic sign of strong external force from behind. Both injuries occurred antemortem, as there were mild biological reaction signs around the fractures, indicating the body was still active when the impacts occurred. Based on the injury pattern, the forensics concluded that Lydia had been struck with a hard object, possibly a large rock or wooden item, at least twice, once from the front and once from behind. This was a crucial piece for the cause of death. Next, the forensics examined the ribs and limb bones. 4 right-side ribs showed healed, crushed fractures, along with 2 defensive fractures on the left forearm bones, characteristic of a reflex to raise arms in protection. These injuries indicated that Lydia had attempted to defend herself before being fully incapacitated. These marks aligned with a scenario of a surprise attack at the trail junction area, followed by fleeing into the wilderness, then being pursued and struck down, eerily matching the fragmented descriptions Butler provided during interrogation. From the hyoid bone, the forensics noted a small fracture on the greater horn, one of the signs potentially related to strangulation or strong impact to the neck area. Although insufficient to conclude strangulation as the primary cause, this fracture indicated that Lydia's neck region sustained significant force during the struggle. However, it was the skull with its two severe injuries that directly led to the conclusion on cause of death: severe traumatic brain injury due to blunt force trauma. This conclusion was established and signed in the forensic protocol after cross-referencing multiple data layers. However, the forensic work did not stop there. The DNA analysis team proceeded to extract DNA from the femur and teeth, two sites with the highest DNA preservation rates in long-term decomposition conditions. Comparison results with Lydia's mother's DNA sample, collected and matched under CODIS protocol, showed a 17/17 locus match, a 99.999% certainty level for identity confirmation. This was the final legal verification. The remains found were those of Lydia Harmon. Once identity was confirmed, the next step was to examine the evidence items found at the scene and in Butler's office to establish clear linkages. The remaining small chain portion found next to the remains was placed under a magnifying glass for wear and fracture comparison. The sharp fracture on the pendant chain buried in the forest perfectly matched the fracture on the chain portion seized from Butler's office. When the two pieces were placed together, the break lines formed a natural joint, as if reassembling parts of the same object. This was the strongest physical evidence directly linking Butler to Lydia's body at the time of death. The trace evidence team continued analyzing the bracelet fragments submitted by Jonah. The silver heart-shaped portion was broken in exact correspondence to the remaining structure at the scene. Under the microscope, scratches, cracks, and metallurgical characteristics matched down to the grain, confirming it was the same bracelet broken during struggle or strong impact. This proved that Jonah did not merely happen to find the bracelet, but that it was indeed an item that fell from Lydia's body at the moment she was attacked. These matching results elevated Jonah's notebook and notes about Butler, diverting the search party into critical evidence, validating his account after 36 years. Additionally, trace evidence forensics analyzed the surface of several fabric fragments found next to the remains. The fiber structure and weave pattern matched the type of t-shirt Lydia wore on the night she disappeared. On the fabric fragments, forensics also found an unusual long tear with twisted fiber edges, a classic sign of forceful pulling or tugging. This aligned with Butler's description of an argument and running into the woods, while also consistent with the defensive injuries on the forearm bones. In the final phase of the examination, the mineral and soil analysis team compared soil adhering to the bones and soil from the crevice where the body was buried. Results showed matches at the micromineral level, confirming the body had never been moved from its original location. Thus, Butler was telling the truth in one part of his statement: he had not dug up or moved the body over the years. But this very fact reinforced the most critical truth, since the body had remained untouched since 1976. All evidence items next to it, the broken bracelet, fabric pieces, pendant chain, were intact. Traces from the moment Lydia was killed, impossible to tamper with later. When all examination results were compiled, the lead forensic pathologist signed the final report: victim identity, Lydia Harmon. Cause of death, severe traumatic brain injury due to blunt force trauma. Manner of death, assault. Classification of death, homicide. The report also confirmed two key evidence items: the broken bracelet and shattered pendant chain, directly linking the death scene to the evidence from Jonah and the items seized from Butler's office. By late afternoon on April 27, 2012, the forensic examination file was transferred to Wenatchee PD and the Clayton County Prosecutor's Office, marking the first time in 36 years that Lydia Harmon's cause of death was scientifically confirmed, no longer based on speculation or inconsistent statements, but on irrefutable physical, genetic, and injury pattern evidence. Immediately after the complete forensic report was transferred to Wenatchee PD and the Clayton County Prosecutor's Office at the end of April 27, 2012, The process of consolidating all data, physical evidence, reconstructed timeline, interrogation statements, forensic conclusions, and supporting documents was initiated in accordance with the standard prosecution preparation procedure for serious criminal cases under Washington state law. The investigation team and assigned criminal prosecutors were tasked with building the mandatory prosecution package in compliance with RCW standards, consisting of 4 parts: physical evidence, scientific analysis, statements and confessions, and chronological crime sequence reconstruction. First, the physical evidence group was standardized into a coded CVE catalog, including the necklace bearing LH initials seized from Butler's office, the broken pendant fragment next to the remains, the broken silver bracelet provided by Jonah, and its matching portion found in the crevice. Butler's hand-drawn sketch map, Jonah's notebook noting Butler diverting the search party, photos of Butler appearing at the Eastern Trail Junction, and all excavated evidence from the scene. All were sealed under homicide-grade heavy evidence standards, with the 36-year chain of custody restored from archives to ensure integrity. Next, the scientific analysis group compiled all forensic data into a single report, including DNA identity conclusion, skull trauma pattern, defensive trace marks on bones, perfect matches between the 2 necklace parts and the 2 bracelet parts, and soil mineral analysis confirming the body was never moved. This report was attached with the Expert Testimony Ready designation, meaning all conclusions were prepared for expert courtroom testimony under Fry and Dobert standards. Concurrently, the statements group built the declaration file, including Jonah Marino's 2012 statement, supplemental statements from Lydia's friend group witnesses, Butler's partial confession and later body location disclosure, and systematic inconsistencies between 1976 and 2012 statements. Each statement was coded as Witness Statement Exhibit, specifying reliability level, cross-referenced physical evidence, and role in the prosecution structure. Finally, all data was incorporated into the Unified Timeline Reconstruction, a comprehensive timeline over 30 pages long, detailing events between 2255 and 2330 on August 14, 1976, including the point Lydia separated from the group, the area Butler appeared, the Eastern Turn region, locations where evidence items fell, the direction Butler pursued, the moment of conflict, the path to the crevice, and the act of concealing the body. This timeline served as the foundational structure for charging on 3 main counts: homicide, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of a missing person investigation. To complete the prosecution file, the prosecutor's office standardized all documents under RCW 10.37 format, requiring each charging element to have direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, and independent scientific analysis. The forensic report provided direct evidence of the death mechanism. The broken necklace and bracelet served as direct linking evidence between Butler and the victim. Butler's and Jonah's statements constituted circumstantial evidence, while light terrain time simulations provided independent technical evidence. After 3 days of calibration and cross-verification of each data item, the official prosecution file was finalized on the evening of April 30, 2012, becoming the most comprehensive file ever assembled for the Lydia Harmon case since 1976, fully meeting Washington state standards for prosecuting high-degree murder charges. The trial of Clayton Butler took place at Chelan County Superior Court on June 18, 2012, lasting nearly 3 weeks and becoming the most closely followed judicial event in central Washington state in years. The courtroom was consistently packed. Reporters from the Seattle, Spokane, and Wenatchee areas, along with Lydia Harmon's family and those who had participated in the 1976 search, were all present. The prosecution opened with a comprehensive chronicle presentation, lasting more than 2 hours, reconstructing the entire sequence of events, from the night of the disappearance in 1976 to the discovery of the remains in 2012. On the screen behind the prosecutor was a merged 1976, 2012 timeline, with each milestone map and piece of physical evidence presented in logical order. The prosecutor asserted from the outset that this case was not just a concealed murder, but a classic example of deliberate misdirection in an investigation. For 36 years, a false story led the community astray, and only when data, science, and the courage of those willing to speak the truth came together was the case able to be reopened. The core of the prosecution's strategy rested on three pillars: motive, opportunity, action. The entire trial revolved around proving that Butler was present at the location of the conflict, had the opportunity to access Lydia, deliberately misled the search, and kept related evidence for decades. The first witness called was Jonah Marino. Jonah's appearance, now over 60 years old, had a strong impact on the jury. He recounted in detail his involvement in the 1976 search team, particularly the incident where Butler separated from the group for about 20-25 minutes heading northeast, with a calm, steady voice and no hesitation. Jonah presented the original notebook, comparing each entry in front of the jury. When the prosecutor asked, "Why did you keep it for 36 years?" Jonah replied, "Because I knew something was wrong, but I only fully understood it when other evidence emerged." The jury took notes continuously. During cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to suggest that Jonah's memory might have been affected over time. However, Jonah countered by precisely matching the symbols and notes with the hand-drawn map seized from Butler's office. The near-perfect match rendered the cross-examination questions largely ineffective. The second witness was Caleb Price, the reporter who received the anonymous email. Caleb described how he received the edited map and photo of Butler standing in the overlooked area. The prosecution proved that the anonymous email sender had insider knowledge that only those present during the 1976 search would know. When the defense attorney tried to imply that the email might have been intended to slander, the prosecution presented metadata analysis showing that the original file was related to Butler's map. At this point, the jury was shown the original 1976 map by Wells, with the eastern area completely crossed out, placed next to Butler's sketched map. The two maps were displayed side by side on the large screen, and the prosecutor pointed directly, "This is the decision that left a 17-year-old girl lying in the forest for 36 years." The next witness was the 2012 geography and light simulation expert. He detailed how the moonlight on the night of August 14, 1976, was simulated using original astronomical parameters, showing that the position Butler claimed to be standing in could not possibly have seen Lydia as he had described. When the expert pointed to the light map and marked the completely dark area where Lydia had passed, the jury clearly saw the absurdity of Butler's statement. Next, the expert presented a velocity calculation model. Butler could not have appeared at the two positions he described within the same 20-minute time frame. During cross-examination, the defense attorney argued that the simulation was merely a technical assumption. However, the prosecution immediately countered, "This is not just a simulation, it was cross-checked with on-site verification, maps from that era, and witness behavior. And it all leads to one conclusion: Butler was standing where he denied having stood." The next scientific witness was the chief forensic pathologist. This was the witness that the entire courtroom followed almost breathlessly. He presented the skull analysis, particularly the two indentations on the forehead and the back of the head, clearly caused by strong external force. The part the jury focused on most was when the chief pathologist described the fingernail bone fractures, defensive reflex marks on the forearm bones, and rib fractures from impact. These are injuries consistent with the victim being attacked, not from a fall or accident. Then, he fitted the two pieces of the necklace, one from the scene, one seized from Butler's office, right in front of the jury. They matched to the point of no doubt. When the prosecutor asked, "Is there any possibility that these two necklace pieces belong to two different people?" the chief pathologist simply replied, "No, these are two pieces of the same item." Many jury members turned to look at Butler at that moment. The next witness was the trace evidence expert, who analyzed minerals adhering to the bones and soil. He presented that Lydia's body had never been moved during the 36 years. This completely refuted any defense hypothesis about someone else possibly placing the body there later. Next, the prosecution called the lead investigator, who oversaw the entire 2012 reinvestigation. This was the most critical part of the trial. The investigator presented the investigation sequence from receiving the anonymous email, data analysis, timeline reconstruction, finding matches between Butler's drawn map and the evidence Jonah had kept, to searching Butler's office and recovering Lydia's necklace. Each piece of evidence was displayed on the large screen with identification numbers and collection procedures, ensuring no gaps in legality. The prosecutor asked, "What was the most important thing you found in Butler's office?" The investigator replied, "An item belonging to the victim, found in the suspect's possession 36 years after the disappearance, that cannot be explained in any other way." Butler, now sitting at the defense table, no longer maintained the confident demeanor of the early days. He repeatedly scribbled notes, leaned toward his attorney, but his face was tense and his eyes avoided contact with the jury. In the confession portion, the prosecution played the recording of Butler describing where he placed the body, the rock crevice to the north, where no one searched. The courtroom fell almost completely silent when Butler's voice said, "I left her there." The defense attorney tried to argue that the statement was made under psychological pressure, but the prosecution countered that the confession was entirely voluntary, with counsel present and no form of coercion. Then, the prosecution overlaid the confession onto the actual terrain map and scene photos to prove that Butler's description matched the real terrain down to the meter. The defense's case for Butler appeared weak from the start. They tried to build a hypothesis that evidence might have been moved or stolen before appearing in Butler's office. However, the prosecution only needed to present the chain of custody timeline, photos of Butler's fingerprints on the bracelet images, and paper analysis from the 1970s era to dismantle that argument. Another defense effort was to imply that Jonah had a personal motive against Butler, but when the prosecutor asked, "What motive would make someone keep a notebook for 36 years?" the defense had no rebuttal. The closing arguments ended with a powerful statement from the prosecution. Clayton Butler did not just attack Lydia. He led the entire community on a meaningless search for 36 years, with false information he himself created. But science brought Lydia back, and the truth brought him here. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom maintained a heavy atmosphere for nearly 7 hours. At 8:12 p.m. on July 6, 2012, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, looked directly at the judge, and read slowly, "We find the defendant Clayton Butler guilty on all charges." A few people in the room began to cry. Butler bowed his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table tightly, saying nothing. After 36 years, the story he had fabricated to deny the truth no longer held weight against the evidence, science, and honest testimony. Butler lost completely in court. The sentence was handed down on the morning of July 12, 2012, in Chelan County Superior Court, just 6 days after the jury reached a unanimous guilty verdict on all charges. Judge Ellen Marbury read the judgment in a courtroom that was almost breathless. Clayton Butler was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for first-degree homicide, along with 2 additional sentences for concealing evidence and obstructing a missing person investigation. Butler showed no reaction, only slightly bowing his head, his hands clutching the edge of the table, as if holding onto the remnants of a life he had lost 36 years earlier. His attorney announced they would consider appeal rights, but observers all understood that the scientific evidence, physical evidence, and Butler's own confession had created an airtight legal structure with no gaps. After Butler was escorted out of the courtroom, the prosecution continued to announce the results of the accountability review regarding the 1976 investigation file. The report showed that former Sheriff Norman Wells was not directly involved in the fatal act, but his responsibility for removing the eastern area from the search map, storing falsified records, and failing to verify Butler's statement was serious. Wells, now 79 years old, was charged with obstruction of a missing person investigation under RCW 9.76, based on evidence that he had confirmed Butler's alibi without basis, made false notes in witness reports, and did not include Butler's provided sketch map in the investigation scope. In a separate hearing held in August 2012, Wells admitted professional shortcomings but denied intentional cover-up. However, the court concluded that his actions contributed to prolonging the time the victim could not be found and sentenced him to 18 months of probation along with a civil fine. Though the sentence for Wells was more symbolic than punitive, it marked the first time in Chelan County history that a law enforcement agency was held legally accountable for mishandling a missing person case. After sentencing Butler, the Wenatchee PD and Spokane PD released a nearly 200-page summary report, clearly stating why the case was solved after being buried for 36 years. Not due to a simple confession alone, but thanks to a properly applied chain of modern investigative techniques. The report emphasized three key factors. First, reconstructing the timeline using light simulation, geography, and movement velocity exposed core contradictions in the 1976 statements. Second, physical evidence analysis using forensic technology, DNA, trace evidence, metal fragment matching, soil mineral comparison, established a direct link between Butler and the victim. Third, the late appearance of witness Jonah Marino, along with the evidence he kept for decades, compensated for the irreversible shortcomings of the initial investigation. The report also clearly concluded that the Lydia Harmon case is proof of the role of multidisciplinary investigation when topographic map analysis, modern forensic techniques, scene simulation, and evidence management were combined with witness testimony. The entire 1976 picture emerged with an accuracy that the previous generation of investigators could not achieve. Finally, the investigation summary closed with a short but weighty sentence: the 36-year case was not solved by luck, but by re-asking old questions with new tools. The Lydia Harmon case, once sunk in silence for more than 3 decades, was finally found, not only through the remains brought home, but through the truth restored by science, persistence, and the determination of those who refused to let a 1976 error become the final story. The story of the Lydia Harmon case, spanning 36 years from the night of disappearance in 1976 to the moment the truth was uncovered in 2012, reflects issues that remain present in American life today: blind trust in unverified sources of information, the ease of being misled by figures with social authority, and the importance of maintaining standards of investigation, transparency, and accountability. The fact that Clayton Butler, a young volunteer considered reliable at the time, could so easily misdirect the entire initial search shows the consequences of letting emotion or personal trust replace factual verification. This directly relates to modern American society, where information spreads rapidly and citizens face countless unsubstantiated claims every day. The central lesson from this case is the necessity of critical thinking and the ability to demand supporting data, especially when that information affects community safety. Jonah Marino, keeping the bracelet fragment and notebook for decades, even though he didn't fully understand their value at the time, reminds us that small observations, doubts once dismissed as meaningless, can sometimes be the key to unlocking the truth. In today's life, whether in work environments, social relationships, or civic activities, noting and preserving important details, no matter how small, can become the foundation for protecting oneself and others. Most importantly, the reinvestigation effort, using modern technology, from light simulation, geographic analysis to DNA matching, shows the power of updating methods and refusing to let old errors persist, just because that's how it's always been. American society today still faces many issues requiring scientific verification and the willingness to re-examine long-held assumptions. The Lydia Harmon case reminds us that justice sometimes arrives late, but it only arrives when someone dares to revisit the truth with new tools and an unrelenting spirit. Thank you for following this journey to solve a 36-year case. If you want to continue joining stories of justice illuminated by truth, please hit subscribe so you don't miss any videos. See you in the next episode, where we continue to explore cases that seemed forgotten but still await decoding.